small agenda, a special agenda item that we need to approve before we move into the budget workshop. And so in the special agenda, it's A, consider resolution supporting Tom Green County in their efforts to amend the Defense Economic Adjustment Assistance Grant supporting Goodfellow Air Force Base. Whereas Goodfellow Air Force Base is located in the city of San Angelo, Tom Green County, Texas, and is the city's largest employer. And whereas the mission of Goodfellow Air Force Base is intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and fire training for all the branches of the United States military in Tom Green County. And whereas the Texas Military Preparedness Commission within the Office of the Governor of Texas established a grant program known as the Defense Economic Adjustment Assistance to provide state funding for the following acquiring federal grant assistance for sharing in the cost of redevelopment of communities that have been adversely or positively affected by the Base Realignment and Closure Act or Department of Defense reduction of, or loss of funding, or in the case of infrastructure, adds military value installation. And whereas this program enabled Goodfellow Air Force Base to renovate the buildings in 2017 for intelligence training that was extended to 32 allied countries. And whereas Goodfellow Air Force Base, with the support of Tom Green County and the City of San Angelo Development Corporation, was awarded a Defense Economic Adjustment Grant on December 15, 2017 to expand a dining facility, renovate 2 classroom training facilities, deliver capital equipment, and develop a new joint center for targeting and weaponry. And whereas the Texas Military Preparedness Commission has indicated additional funding is available for the current projects upon request and amended application. And whereas the city is honored by the recognition and support Governor Abbott and the state of Texas has previously shown Goodfellow Air Force Base. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of San Angelo City Council recognizes the importance of Goodfellow Air Force Base to the success of the mission of our military and is hereby fully supports Tom Green County's efforts to seek an amendment to the Defense Economic Adjustment Assistance Grant and the request for additional funding from the Texas Military Preparedness Commission to support the vital operations of Goodfellow Air Force Base. With that having been read, I would ask for a motion from the council to approve the resolution.
So moved. Approve.
A second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes 7-0. With that, I will now ask for an adjournment of this special meeting.
Adjourn.
Seconded.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. The resolution is approved. We will now call the budget workshop to order. Notice is hereby given of a special meeting of the City Council of the City of San Angelo to be held on August 28, 2018 at 8:40 a.m. at the McNeese Convention Center, South Meeting Room, 501 Rio Concho Drive, San Angelo, Texas, for the purpose of considering the following agenda items. In the workshop agenda, A is discussion of matters regarding the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget presentation, including but not limited to 1, general fund revenue and expenditures, 2, priorities and goals, and 3, other items needing council direction. Tina, you're on.
City Council, Mr. Valenzuela. We're going to start out by going through our general fund revenues and expenditures, and then we'll present to you some potential opportunities for council's consideration today. On this first slide here, we have a summary of the revenue sources and the expenditures that we're proposing in this budget for fiscal year 2019. You'll see here that we have a property tax increase that we're projecting of $550,000, along with a $52,000 increase in our delinquent tax revenue budget for a total of about $600,000 there of increase. For sales tax, we're projecting an increase of $850,000. Also included in this number, though, is sales alcoholic beverage tax and bingo tax. So that's why it's not the exact $850,000 in that column.
One should note that the $17,417.526 is actual a budget number and not a forecast.
That's correct.
We need to make sure we understand that.
Yes, ma'am. Our fiscal year 18 budget for sales tax alone was $17 million flat. And we're projecting in this proposal is $17,850,000. $17,850,000, pardon me. Okay? So for franchise tax, there's an increase there as well. That's largely due to the change in the Atmos contract, moving from 4% to 5% of franchise fees, gross sales. And charges for service increased largely due to the increase in the ambulance fees that council approved earlier this year. Also, along with that is an increase in the charges for municipal court of about $72,000. Your other revenue there decreased due to the transfer from the Development Corporation that we were receiving in the past to aid in park maintenance, offset by an increase in our interest income of about $90,000. For personnel, the personnel expenditure budget has increased about $300,000. This does include an additional 5 police officers at a cost of about $330,000. If not for that, we would actually have seen a slight decrease in our personnel budget. O&M has increased due to an increase in retiree insurance, an increase in the appraisal district fee. The fire has increased its contract services, and the $25,000 for the police uniforms and weapons for those additional 5 officers. Our transfers is an increase due to the reallocation of the property casualty insurance. When we increased the amounts due from Fort Concho or Texas Bank Sports Complex or any other general fund supported fund, we then increased our transfer out to aid in supplementing that additional expenditure.
All right, let's stop there. Let's dig into this. So on the property tax for the 2017-18, that's an actual number?
No.
All right, what's the actual number?
We're projecting to end the fiscal year at $18.4 million. Oh, for property tax?
Yes.
Pardon me. Property tax for fiscal year 18 was budgeted at 98%, as we always do, of what the appraisal district tells us. And so our property tax year to date is $33,337,000.
Okay, so that's year-to-date, so that's through July.
Through July, yes, ma'am. That's the most recent information
With
we
August
have.
and September left, what is your projected final number on property tax?
We expect to end the year over budget for property tax.
How much?
I can't project that. I can go back and look at August and September of last year and give you that number here in a second. I'll have my staff look that up for you.
$33,337,000, what percent of is
We're
that?
at 99% of our revenue budget.
Okay, so that's pretty much standard. So you would say then if we're at this point $33,337,000 and that's 99% of the number, that's pretty much the number.
Pretty close, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So that would be not, in other words, we would miss the budget for 17-18?
No, ma'am, we don't expect to miss the budget.
Because the number you just gave me is $33,337,000, and the property tax budget for 17-18 is $33,753,000.
Yes, ma'am, and we still have 2 months worth of collections. I'll have my staff check and see what we received last year in those 2 months and try to give you a projection.
But the number you just gave me is 99% already?
Yes, ma'am.
There are other accounts in there.
Yeah, there's also delinquent taxes in that account as well.
And then on sales tax, let's go through, you have your liquor tax,
Yes, ma'am.
and that's being planned how, up or down? Please put all your cell phones on silent.
That includes you too, Daniel.
HBO police.
We're projecting slightly down, slight decrease.
On liquor tax?
Yes, ma'am.
And the rationale for that is?
The 5-year. We're using a 5-year trend.
Okay, so in sales tax, other than liquor tax, what else is in there?
Bingo tax.
And the bingo tax we're planning how?
Bingo tax, we're projecting flat because we only receive it once a year, and we have not received that this year from the comptroller.
So when do you receive it?
I believe it's in September. Yeah. Usually in September.
So the three things in the sales tax are the bingo tax, which is being planned flat, the liquor tax, which is being planned down. So what's remaining is planned how?
What's remaining is the sales tax.
Yes, dollars.
Yes, ma'am.
What percent up or down? When you
Oh.
take out your liquor tax and your bingo
Included
tax?
in this proposal that we're showing you right now is down 3% from actual receipts that we're projecting for the current year.
Actual. So if you take a look at total revenue, well, just let me ask one more thing. So your charges for services, which is the ambulance, is your 2718 number is obviously budget. What's the projection?
Okay, so ambulance fees come in with a two-month lag, so we're projecting to end of the year pretty much right at where we budgeted.
So the 9,000,004.
Oh, no, there's more in charges for service than ambulance. The increase there is largely due to the ambulance fee increase.
So that's increase in fee, not increase in service.
So charges for services includes a lot of things such as ambulance, nature center, recreation, the swimming pool. There's probably 10 or so.
Can you go through those and tell us how they're planned?
They're in the blue book.
I don't think the audience has a blue book in front of them. And the blue book is the budget. We're talking about the plan for 2018-19.
So we're projecting for real estate to be up $19,000. Construction management, a decrease of $14,000. Development services, an increase of $38,800. Parks and Rec, an increase of $33,400. Neighborhood and Family Services down $3,900. Police up $900. Fire up $170,000. And other charges down $1,000 for a total of an increase of $242,000. Then we also have in there municipal court fees, which we're projecting an increase of $72,000. So that's the total that you see there.
Okay. And that is, okay, then go down to the other line, because the charges for services we just went through. Now, on the other line, what's included in that column?
There is an increase in interest of $90,000, an increase in other miscellaneous revenues of $32,000, a decrease in miscellaneous transfers in of $339,000, which again includes that transfer in from the Development Corporation, and a decrease in administrative charges of $16,000.
So if you look at the 2018-2019 budget relative to the 2017-18 forecast, what percent increase are we planning on revenue?
Just on this total revenue line here, the $74 million, is that what you're asking?
Compared to the actual, what we're projecting, using where we're at today in the blue book for 2017 and 2018. So right now we know that you're projecting in sales tax $18,416,400 for 2017-18. So where you have a sales tax on here of $17,000,004, you're basically going to be up $1 million in total revenue compared to the budget for 2017-18, correct?
For sales tax alone, the budget is $17 million, and we're projecting by year end to have $18,400,000.
Yeah, that's what I just said. So that means that with that increase, your total revenue for 17-18 would be approximately $73,232,200. Is that correct?
I don't think I'm following on your question. I'm sorry.
What we have in front of us is a 2017-18 budget.
Yes, ma'am.
What are we projecting for the year? Not the budget, but the projection, because we already know in the sales tax column, we're projecting $18,416,400, not the sales tax budget of $17,417,000. So the point is it looks like your total revenue for 2017 and 18 is going to be up $1 million over the plan or the budget.
Actually, I think it's a little over a million.
I know, I'm asking them to give us the number. Because obviously we have to forecast August and September, so we could use the plan for August and September. Plus.
We're doing a calculation on that for you. Just 1 second, please. I can tell you at the end of July, we were at 91% of our revenue budget. It's very difficult to project a total budget number like that because there are probably 50 to 75 accounts included in that number. And so I'd have to go through every single one of those accounts and do a projection for you. With 2 months left in the year, though, I can say that that is a pretty good number. We should have been at 83% of our revenue budget, and we're at 91%.
Correct. So, but when we're talking about how we're going to plan 2018-19, we need to understand what percent increase are we planning on revenue over 2017-18 actuals. So we need to know that number, and I believe that number is about a 1.5% increase if you put into the sales tax column only your projected sales tax. You come up with about a 1.5% increase in revenue versus the budget, I think.
Well, the projection for revenue for next year is contained in the 2018-19 column. That's their projection for next year.
No.
Except for sales tax, which is probably overly conservative at this point.
I agree. But if we use where we're at on sales tax at the end of July and add the August and September plan, even if it's just flat, what number do you get?
Mayor, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on this. So 2017, 2018, specifically the sales tax, we should be at 18,400, whatever we're saying we're projecting.
I'm saying that's
what
$1
you're saying
million
at this point.
more.
Okay. Tina,
Right?
did you,
So if you're $1 million more, it would say minimally you should be at $73,500,000, right?
okay. So I see what you're saying. So you want to make sure that we add up what we're projecting to end the year at 2017, 2018 based on actuals up to this point.
Yes.
So that sales tax should be up over 18,400.
16,400 is the number in the information that we've been provided, you've projected sales tax at $18,416,400.
Yes, but that's not what's in the budget. That's not what's in the proposed budget.
Proposed budget
No.
I know, but
I
North-
know, we're trying to look at a trend line. A trend line means where are you projected to end in revenue at the end of 2017-18, which would be September 30th, right? Using your sales tax number, that would basically, so if you just take the increase in sales tax number that you have today, plus your actual or your plan, August, September, you would come up with a number somewhere in the 73 million.
Mayor, they've done those projections on an individual account basis because each of the revenue patterns is different.
I
So
know.
what you're asking to do overall, they've done account by account. The only one which, at this point, we have a question about is how aggressive to be with the sales tax budget.
Total
We would
revenue.
suggest, because of the diversity in the collection pattern, for example, bingo tax, we haven't even received yet. But because of the diversity, it's a more accurate methodology to project those trends on an account-by-account basis and let that lead you to what the overall answer is. You appear to be trying to determine the overall and project based on overall, and we would propose that it's more accurate to do it on an account-by-account basis.
Okay, so let's go through
Say
that.
that
then.
we
We
do.
just went through that. That's
Well,
what she just
We
did.
do that on an
Okay,
account.
so then what's the total number?
74.35 million plus whatever additional amount you want for sales tax.
We're projecting the end of the year at $73,917,000, which is over our budget.
Correct, so if you have 73,900,000, right? Minus your budget plan for 18-19 of 74,354,364, what increase is that?
The dollar amount increase is $1.4 million.
Okay, so if you take $1,400,000 divided by your projected 27-18, you will give us a % increase plan for this budget for 2018-19.
Yes, ma'am, I can do that.
Did you say 73.9?
Yes.
That's just the 400. 73.9 to 74.3.
73.9 is over
400.
our current year budget.
Got an increase of over $600,000 on your property tax.
Correct.
So that's more than, if you take that and straight line your sales tax, that's more than the 74,354 based on your conservative figure of 3% down. If you went to 1.5% as a conservative figure, this number would probably increase. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So we can look at 74,354 and say that that's 3% down from the projected sales tax revenue for 17-18. And if we decided that that was too conservative and went to 1.5% down from the 17-18 four-year sales tax for 18-19, that would give you an additional amount of money under the total revenue. Is that's correct?
That's why
Yes.
we're talking about it, Harry. You
So-
defined it, yes.
Can I say something,
Yes,
Mayor?
ma'am.
The $1.8 million increase to revenue that you see there, the total increase that we're projecting here and proposing, that is a 2.5% increase over our current year projected actuals. Is that what you were asking?
Well, yeah, because a minute ago, we said we were planning 3% down.
Okay, you said the
there are
projected
other-
actuals are 73.9?
Yes.
73.9 plus 400 is 74.3.
Yes.
So the difference is 400,000. That's less than 1%.
Yes.
It's 0.8%, I believe. So that's where we need to be in conversation, because I think when we originally started, we said we were down 3% in planned revenues. That might be to budget 17,
Oh, that's just
18,
that one line item. One line item out of all of those revenue line items is budgeted down from this year's projected actual. Sales tax is not the only revenue line.
No, but let me make sure I understand this, because a minute ago, we said that the sales tax number projected for 2018 is $18,416,400. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if the sales tax revenue for year ending September 30th, 2018 is $18,416,400, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if you take a look at that compared to the budget plan of 18,257,000, what percent down is that? About 0.08, right?
18.2 contains more than just sales tax.
I understand that, Michael, but what they said to us a minute ago was the sales tax number projected is 18,416,400. That's what you've given me as a number, right? Whatever's in there, it's still the projected number on here, right?
Yes, it's less 3%, down 3%, 17.8 or 17.850.
On the
Said
slide.
18,416,400 is a 0% change. So that means you're projecting 18,416,400. It's right there. 0% change.
That is what we're projecting to end this year. That is not what we were proposing in the budget. What we
I
were
know.
proposing in the budget is the 3% decrease.
Exactly. But if you are projecting a 0% change in your sales tax projection of all the things that make up sales tax, whatever they are, which we just discussed what they are, you're projecting 18,416,400, right?
No,
For the current year, not for this budget.
I know. The current year is 2017-18.
Yes.
Correct? 2017-18, if we planned it flat, it would be 18,416,400.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So, saying that, and looking at your 2018-19 budget of 18,257,000 is almost $200,000 difference, right?
no.
Not for sales tax.
18.2 contains sales tax, mixed beverage tax, and bingo tax.
Got it. But so does the 18,416,000, right?
If you plug the
No, it does not.
18.4 into that line, could you go back to the other slide, please? If you plug the 18.4 into that line goes up by 500,000 and change. You're talking about the difference between a combination of 3 different revenue streams.
They're all
Yeah,
included in
no,
sales
ma'am.
tax.
I think that's the misunderstanding. The sales tax number that we're projecting at 18.4 is just sales tax alone. No bingo, no mixed beverage included in that number.
Tina, so if you were to add the 18,417 plus all the other items that go in that line, then 2017, 2018 would be a higher number on that sales tax number, correct?
Yes, it would
Okay.
be,
That's what we're
o-
asking
Okay, that's what-
for.
it would be over
What I keep asking.
18.8 million.
Okay, so
18.8. Okay, that's what we needed the number to be. So when you project it down by 3%, you're using 18,000,008.
No, when we're projecting sales tax, it's sales tax alone. We just group them on the schedule together to make the schedule simpler and not have so many lines.
All right, but we just need to understand what that is.
Okay.
So, because if we just say sales tax, and you look at your forecast, sales tax alone, you're planning to be 18,416,400.
That's correct.
Okay, and then you're going to add into that the additional items, bingo tax, alcohol tax,
Yes.
et cetera. So
So
when
that-
you, go
That's
ahead.
correct.
So when you do that,
So we started with 17,850,000, which is that 3% decrease that we've discussed. Then we added in bingo tax at around $375,000. I'm sorry, I switched those around. Beverage tax of $375 and bingo tax of about $43,000, and that gets you to the $18,257,000.
okay, so 18,257,000 is a combination of bingo tax, alcohol tax, and sales tax.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that's your 18,257,000 budget. And your 2017-18, if you take your sales tax line plus your bingo tax plus your alcohol tax, you're at 18,800,000.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. That way, we better understand what we're projecting in revenue, because right now, it would say that if you take a look at your sales tax, this is based off of a budget for 2017-18, but we're, what'd we say, 83% through?
We are, at the end of July, we were 83% through the year, and we had collected 91% of projected revenues, or
So what-
budgeted revenues.
So what we're really trying to do right now it's great that we're looking at numbers for 2018-19 budget compared to the budget of 2017-18, but what we really have to talk about is the actuals as projected.
Yes,
Using your
ma'am.
blue book and forecasting.
And
just
everything
plain.
that is on
Yeah.
this page and
Yeah.
proposed in this budget is based on us doing that in the background.
Okay, so that means your total revenue then for 2017-18 is going to be projected to be what number?
I believe I said that earlier, it was the 74,900,000.
You said 73.9.
73.9 is what you said.
So if you have 73.9
Pardon me.
as your
Thank you.
projected 2017-18, compared to your right now budget plan of 74,354,364, your planned increase is?
You want a percentage?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just one moment.
It's going to be 0.5%, I believe, in change.
It's one half. I think it's 1/2 of 1% is what I think it is. Yeah.
But that is at the lower sales tax estimate, Mayor.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to get to. Instead of budget, what are we really looking at relative to where we're trending? And that's what you're giving me.
So with the actuals being projected at 73.9 and our budget being proposed at 74.3, that would be an increase of 0.5%.
Okay. And the dollars then would be what?
It was about 430,000.
Okay, so even though this reflects us looking at a planned budget of an increase in revenue of $1,851,000 over the budgeted 2017, we're actually looking at a $430,000 increase in, from year to year.
In this proposed budget with an ultra-conservative number in there for sales tax, yes.
But that's the number. So, and I just want to keep making that point because 2017-18 budget was a budget approved last year in August, and we've had 9 months of actuals. So we want to make sure we're looking at the planned increase for the 18-19 budget versus the actual projected 2017-18.
Yes, ma'am, and we do that. We update that spreadsheet every month at month end.
And why no? We just want to make sure, because this is televised, people watch this.
Yes, ma'am.
And they don't have blue books in front of them, so we want to make sure everyone who's watching this understands what we're really planning here.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So do I have other questions from council on the revenue budget? Yes, Tommy?
Tina, is that increase in the property tax lower than what we have seen in the past or that we normally see, however to ask the question?
It is very low, yes. It's 1.67% increase this year. We're used to seeing somewhere in the neighborhood of at least 3 to 4%. Over the last 20 years, we've been in that basic average area, about 3% to 4%. So it was low this year.
And yet, are the evaluations the certified valuations that we've received up?
They are up by that 1.67%, but in speaking with the appraisal district, I'm told that we're seeing the valuation start to level off.
And reasons they have given for them to
I
start?
think it was 1,600 people who filed grievances about last year's,
Okay.
probably.
And that is part of it. They do hold back some of the certified values when they give us those valuations because they don't want to overestimate and cause us to overestimate our budget as well.
So I guess then on a go-forward basis, we're going to be looking at something less than 3 to 4%. I guess we're going to be looking at 1.5% roughly.
We definitely have to because, I mean, starting this budget, I asked Tina, so what are we looking at, Tina? Close to 4% as far as, and she actually, we thought that would be the right number. But when the numbers actually came through, we saw 1.67. You better believe that next year when we start looking at it, I'm not going to be saying, Tina, what do you think, 4%? I'm going to be saying, hey, what do you think, 1.5%? You know, so we do have to be very conservative when it comes to that number.
You know, Tommy, also one of the things that, you know, we've had a lot of new companies come to town, but they are going into existing facilities that were empty. So where in 2013 and 14 you saw people building new facilities, we had a big jump in total dollars, but right now we're filling empty buildings more than we're developing new buildings. And so I think that's also, if you take a look at trend from previous years, that's one of the differences in terms of
It just jumped out at me that it seemed lower than what we had
Yes,
seen
they
last
did.
year.
I think they
even.
had a lot of appeals this year. Our chief appraiser did tell me that he held back $44 million worth of valuations because they are still going through that review process, and he likes to be conservative in giving us our numbers. Also, last year we had $80 million in new construction or improvements, and this year we had $50 million. So it's just there are numerous factors that play
Okay.
into it.
All right.
we
Thanks.
had so many new Walmarts that came up last year, because
Yeah.
if you take a look at when they came online for the appraisals, it has a huge impact.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Tina.
You're welcome.
Okay, so, Tina,
Yes.
you're on again.
Okay.
You want to go through, because I got us back up into the total revenue piece of it?
Yes, ma'am.
And let's go down to the expenditures. So, once again, let's take a look at where we're trending on expenses for the 17-18 versus the budget compared to our 18-19 budget as presented today. So from this, it says that we're up $850,064 compared to the budget at 17-18. And so is the $73,753,391 still the number that we are looking at?
So the expenditures at July 31st, our total actual year-to-date, we're at 79%, and at 83% through the year. So we're trending under budget for expenditures right now, and that includes encumbrances as well.
Okay.
Includes what, did you say, Tina?
Encumbrances, so if
Okay.
there are projects that we know that we will have to pay for, we go ahead and encumber those.
Yeah.
So then if we're looking at the 18-19 budget versus the 17-18 forecast, the increase in expenditures, number one, what is this number in terms of a percent increase over last year budget, and then increase over projected this year?
The $850,000 is an increase of 1.2% over last year's budget. Was that your first question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the second question?
Based off of your forecast on actual expenditures, what would that number be? And what percent would that be then to the planned number?
Mayor, for expenditures, we forecast that departments will spend what they're allotted to spend. They usually will come in much less than that, but counting on them not spending monies which we've already authorized we think is less than prudent. We anticipate that they will come in lower, and the kind of savings we can count on are savings in personnel where they've had significant turnover or vacancies which have lasted for an extended period of time. But below the personnel line in O&M and capital, we anticipate that they will spend what they put into their detailed budget justifications. There are detailed justifications for every line item in the budget that departments have prepared, and unless we have knowledge that an expenditure or a project won't occur, we anticipate they'll spend all of that money. So our projection for the year for expenditures is what was budgeted.
Okay, so what you're telling me is we're going to increase our expenditures by 1.2% in this budget, and we're going to plan revenue 0.5%. So we're increasing expenditures over revenue.
No, that's, if you're speaking actuals. No, we are
I'm
not
speaking-
increasing.
Yeah, I'm speaking these, well, go ahead, and then I'll ask the question. Go ahead.
No, we are not. That's the answer to that question. I don't know.
Well, you just said that the 850,000 increase here in expenditures is up 1.2% over the budgeted 2017-18.
That's correct.
We just
But
discussed,
if you're going to use the budget for that number, you have to use the budget above as well.
that's why I was trying to get to a projected expenditure.
I understand.
And so Michael's saying we're going to spend the money that's budgeted, but we're increasing our revenue to $73,900,000. So those are the numbers you guys gave me.
Those are the numbers created on the fly. The numbers we're giving you are the ones that are on the screen, which show that revenue is projected up $1.8 million. Expenditures at this point are projected up by $850,000, leaving you with $1 million to allocate as you see fit.
I have a big picture question. I assume, I don't know this, we have a consumer price index that businesses use, people use to see what the overall increase of things are in our economy. Is there a municipal price index? And if there is, what is the historical increase of that year over year?
There is a municipal cost index. I have not looked it up recently, but it's usually in the neighborhood of 4%.
So that affects us, obviously, as it does any municipality.
Yes.
So does that play into y'all's, your conversations at any point in time, that we know we're having costs increase to us as a municipality? Or maybe the better question is, how does that figure into what y'all work on for the budget each year?
We actually do consider that, and our operations department has asked me for that many times because they use that information to forecast what they think costs will be from year to year.
So I guess my observation is our expenditures are projected flat just based on the numbers we see on the page here, but we know we are having increases in different areas. How are we addressing that to keep in order to keep our expenditures flat?
Tommy, the cost increases when you keep the dollars flat. The cost increases squeeze services out of the budget. In other words, when the cost to seal coat goes up, but your budget does not go up, you seal coat less street square footage or square yardage. That's the answer.
I mean, on the flip side of that, whenever we see the percentage go down, and there's times that Shane can actually do more streets with the monies that we have. So we do more than the 1/8 that we're planning to do to kind of make sure that we're ahead of the curve in case we do have a year when we have the services being squeezed. And we can kind of balance that out. So our goal, of course, let's say with, since Mike used that example, with seal coating streets, our goal is to complete the seal coated streets over an 8-year period. So we know that we're going to have those years. So Shane, at some points, will actually request that we do more streets because we had additional monies left over in anticipation that we'll have those years where we're being squeezed. So we want to make sure that we meet that goal.
So that's going to affect every department because it doesn't matter what the department is within the city. So I guess my observation is, it seems to me we do quite well with really not a whole lot of increase in revenue and not much increase in expenditure either, even though we have, as a municipality, we have ever-increasing costs that we have to absorb. So I guess Michael really answered the question. It's less services for the citizens in what, it doesn't matter what the area is, it's just less service.
Well, we hope that our managers are clever enough to figure out how to get those things, the same thing done.
Agreed.
And usually they are, but sometimes it's tough. Sometimes when the costs go up dramatically, we've seen that in water. We went through a spike in chemical increases a few years back, and I don't know what the latest is on that, but sometimes those cost increases spike, and it does make it difficult.
I can also tell you that over the years, the city council, justifiably so, has focused in on public safety. You know, we've made some pretty good improvements where in the PD and also in the fire department to address some of those needs and concerns. But I can tell you that all the other funds, when you start looking at those other funds, from 2016 to 2019, expenditures for the total overall has actually gone down. That's 4 years. You know, so that's unheard of when you start talking about the municipal cost index. So again, taking that out of the equation, of course, because we did make those adjustments for those two other groups, justifiably so, all the other expenditures have actually remained pretty flat or gone down just a little bit.
And to answer your question, the municipal cost index from July of this year to July of last year is up 3.7%.
I'm not sure this is the right time to ask the question, two questions, but if it's not, we'll delay it till later. But where are we in terms of where we want to be on fund balance versus where we're at? Okay, there's no hurry. You take your time. I'd like to say we have all day, but we're hoping it won't take all day.
We are currently, our current budgeted ending fund balance is at 84 days, and council has set a goal of 75 days.
So we're happy with our fund balance?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what about unfunded liabilities?
I'll have to pull out my CAFR. Sorry, hold on just one moment. You're speaking about other post-retirement,
Somewhere we got to pay for it.
employment benefits and,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, pension liability.
While she's looking, Mayor, I'll point out that the annual burden for those post-employment benefits is the burden for those items is included in the proposed budget before you. So while those things are included based on generally accepted accounting principles, either in liabilities or notes or both, the annual cost associated with those is included in your proposed budget.
Good, because what we don't want to do, like many other municipalities or organizations, is end up with a pension plan that we haven't planned for and a liability we can't afford. So I want to make sure we've included issues related to unfunded liabilities on pension retirement going forward, that it's planned. Yeah.
So what is your specific question then? Or what did that answer
I
it?
think two things. One is the total unfunded liabilities, which you don't have to answer on that one because you might not be able to come up with a good number right now, which
Okay.
is fine. But Michael has answered the fact that we have included in this budget some of those what we would call unfunded liabilities. So every year that has been incorporated into the actual budget, so we're not
Yes.
ignoring it is the point.
Yes, we do meet that obligation
Yeah.
yearly. Yes, ma'am.
That's the key point.
Okay.
Yeah, you've answered it. So let me just recap then what I believe we've said exists here. Right now, if you take a look at the 2018-19 total revenue on this plan compared to 17-18 plan, you're up about 2.5%. But if you take a look at the projected revenue for 17-18, to the 2018-19 plan, we're up about 0.05%.
Yes, that's correct.
So with that being said, so we're planning
5%.
up, yeah.
Yeah.
The revenue, basically flat. Okay, and then, but our expenditures right now from this plan are planned up 1.2% over last year's budget.
Over the budget, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Michael said we can't anticipate anything other than the budget on expenses.
Correct.
But we are counting on them. We're not counting on or relying on. We anticipate that overall they will come in below budget.
That's what we were getting to a minute ago. Thank you. Okay. Do I have further questions from council on any specific big picture item on revenue or expenditures? Okay. Then we will go to, you have a slide that shows the 16-17 actuals. No, we're not doing that slide.
No, ma'am. We do have it if you wanted to see it, but it's at the end of the presentation.
Well, honestly, because it doesn't reflect any percentages, it's just dollars, it's probably not that helpful.
Okay. So do you want me to move on then?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So just a reminder that we are setting the tax rate at the same amount as last year at the .776 per $100 valuation. The fiscal year 19 valuations came in at just over $5 billion, and we budget at a 98% collection rate for that, which is just under $4.6 million. We have traditionally budgeted at that 98% to be conservative and to make sure that we achieve our projection. Again, that is a 1.67% increase over last year. This is the sales tax chart that you're used to seeing, just showing the trend lines for the last 4 years. And here it's just breaking out 2015 to 2018 to show that we are trending right along that same line, with 2015 being slightly up in July and August of this year.
Well, we're trending below it in the first 3 months or 4 months.
That's correct.
Then we basically do the same thing, and then we start to exceed the 2015 one in June.
That's correct. And this year, we don't expect to achieve what we did in 15. In 15, I think that was our biggest sales tax year ever, and it was $18.9 million that we received that year. So here's our sales.
Let me repeat that. So in 2015, in sales tax, we had $18,900,000 in revenue.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And 15 was greater than 14?
Yes.
Mayor, we wanted to show this slide because we thought it was remarkable how close those middle months were, just almost right on top of one another.
I think it's great to show it. I think the trend line is important to look at, so that's great.
So here is our sales tax projection. Again, we are budgeting very conservatively right now in this proposed budget at a 3% decrease. We just wanted to give you those other numbers so that you could kind of see what a ballpark figure would look like if you wanted to discuss making changes to what we proposed.
All right, so this is where it gets a little confusing when you go back to your chart. Because it says a 0% change or flat would be 18,000,004, which we've talked about. We're planning it at 18,000,002, right?
We are planning it at $17,850,000, which is right around that 3% decrease for sales tax alone.
Yeah, so, but we just need to clarify that. So if you take a look at the total line of sales tax, we're planning it flat. No, down
Yes.
on sales tax only, not bingo tax or liquor tax.
That's
and
right.
liquor
Yes,
tax,
ma'am.
you're planning down, and bingo tax, you're planning flat.
Yes.
So do I have questions or comments from council as it relates to the sales tax projection on the budgeted line right now?
So in the proposed budget, you're looking at the 3% decline from the fiscal year 18 numbers.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's $17,850,000, so right at 3%.
I would say that that's really conservative. In my particular case, I would say that we probably would be better off looking at the 1.5% as we go forward with this. I would remind citizens that a budget is only a projection. It's a fluid document. We change it regularly here. It's changed regularly in any business that I've ever been associated with. I changed it a number of times in business that I worked with Goodyear every year. So we know that we're going to update that based on revenues and expenses as we go forward. So I would say the 1.5% decline from this year's sales tax is probably a more realistic number.
Okay, with that said, if let's play the numbers then. So if we're going to pay sales tax at $18,140,154, add into that your liquor tax plan and your bingo tax plan, and come up with a total number.
I think it's going to be eerily close to the 18,416 is my guess is what it's going to be.
We're going through the process.
And can you take us back to that first slide?
Yes, but that number that you just requested, Mayor, is $18,547,000.
$18,547,000.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that number, using Harry's request to look at it from a 1.5% increase in the 2018-19 budget, we would suggest that we could look at an $18,547,000 instead of the $18,200,000, so you would be up approximately $300,000.
$290,000.
So that's an option. Okay. Does anyone on council want to talk about their feelings towards planning it as a 1.5% decline versus a 3% decline? Any comments, questions, Billy?
Well, I would just say that I think what Harry said makes a lot of sense, that we consider this because it is a projection of what we're going to do. The other thing I would like to comment on is something that was said earlier about managing to the resources that we have. And so I guess I have a lot of confidence in our services department. If they say, you know, we're going over budget, then we have to figure out a different way to manage it. So I guess at this point, I'm putting my trust in our directors and managers to, you know, to help us manage to a very limited amount of money that we have to, you know, to distribute. So I like Harry's suggestion of the 1.5%, and then I like the fact that our management is cognizant of the fact that, you know, they're going to have to manage a tighter ship.
Do I have further comment? We are, just to repeat the process today, because I was a little confused about it, we are not taking votes on anything today. What we're trying to do is give direction. So I just want to make sure if council feels positive about that, we give the finance department some direction. And Daniel, you might, my brother's named Danny, so sorry I called you Danny.
My brothers call me Danny, so I'm
my
good.
apologies.
No problem.
How do you feel about the 1.5% decline?
First of all, thank you for what you said, Billy. I appreciate that. I do want to say that a couple of years ago when our sales tax dropped off about $1.2 million, we met every single month with the directors, and we talked about what do we need to do to make sure that we're not in the red at the end of the year. We looked at everything. We cut back. We did everything we possibly could. Put a hiring freeze in place. We did, by the end of the year, we actually were right in line. Thank you for that confidence. That's exactly what we do. We look at it on a month-by-month basis. We make sure that we're making our adjustments. How do I feel about 1.5%? I think that's still a conservative number, but I feel comfortable with that number, Mayor.
Thank you. Tommy, do you have a comment?
I did have a comment, Mayor. I like the 1.5. To me, that is responsible budgeting to better target what our revenues are rather than giving us, let's just call it a lot of money, which is nice to have, no doubt. But to me, it's more responsible to use the 1.5 than the 3. That's my comment.
Tom?
You know, and I see all sides to it, but we've been asked to be ultra conservative in how we've gone through it. And I think it's, from somebody who works off a zero budget, it's great at the end of the year to have the extra revenue there to do things that, you know what, we've got this. But Harry's point is, you know, we move this budget monthly. I like the zero. I can see the 1.5. I mean, you're not going to get a fight out of me either way. I like the zero just because if we manage to make some savings, we have some savings at the end, and it allows us to get some of those things that we might not anticipate. I mean, if we had another June storm, I don't know what it costs to clean up the city like it did 2 years ago in June, but I like the zero. I'm not against the 1.5, but my trend is towards the zero. So, but I'll just leave it at that. I just want to put my input in.
You know, I think one of the hardest things when you go from running a business to city management is the following, is that in business you tend to look for trends and you maximize whatever's happening in a trend. In city business, because generally speaking, you're not the driver of the revenue. You're the receiver. You receive the revenue, but you don't drive the revenue. And so unlike in a business, if I'll make it up, but if sweaters are selling great, you go buy more sweaters to drive the trend higher. Here, it's pretty hard to drive the trend higher because the world out there is controlling the revenue that we have. We can't make people go buy more to help increase our sales tax revenue. So in that sense, we have to be conservative in how we plan it. On the other hand, we have expenses, so we need to be realistic in how we plan it. So with that said, it sounds like, to me, council is giving direction, Tina, to you all to use the 1.5% decline.
Tina, do you have a slide that shows us what that impact would be?
Yes. Just one moment. Do you want to see that number before we discuss what expenditures we're going to include as well?
Let's just follow, Mike, with all due respect, let's just follow the slides the way we
Okay.
have it planned out, okay?
Okay.
Appreciate that.
So here we have our pie chart that shows your revenue sources. Your property tax is about 46% of your revenue budget in the general fund. Your sales tax is about 24% of that amount. And of course, you have other fines and forfeitures, charges for services, the franchise tax, and transfers in as well.
You know, in looking back at some previous years, comparing what sales tax revenue brings to the table versus property tax, what it looks like to me is, okay, in 2015-16, the property tax represented 44.26% to the total, and sales tax represented 28%. So with that said, I don't have the 16, 17 or numbers, but my question, number one, is this general fund revenue source, is this based off of the plan or the actual, projected actual 2017-18? So is this the plan?
This is the plan, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so with that said, then, we've just increased it a bit, so these numbers would change. But I find it interesting that the sales tax has gone down and property tax continues to go up. And that goes back to, Tommy, your question about appraisals and why. So you see those numbers continue to go up statistically, and sales tax go down. So we want to hopefully have a continuation of the sales tax revenue up so that it can reaches back up to 28% of the total. And then charges for services are basically, just go through those real quick so everyone's clear on what is included in that number?
The charges for services, I read out the whole list earlier, but that's where we have the ambulance fees, the municipal court fees, and things like that. So all of those services that we provide and actually have a charge for.
Okay, so if someone comes in and they are charged something to put an awning on their building, where's that?
That would be in the charges for services.
Okay, so our planning and permits department, or permits particularly, is in this charges for services.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is based off of the plan to 2018-19. Is there anything dramatically different on here for what you would have projected for 17-18 actuals? Well, really, your sales tax number would have gone up, but,
Right. No, there's nothing largely different.
okay. Next slide.
Here you have your general fund expenditures by division, with public safety making up about 52% of the general fund's expenditure budget. And then, of course, all of your other departments and divisions there as well.
Based off of the 52% of fire and police for this budget, what percentage has that been in prior years?
It was 52% last year as well. So relatively unchanged.
And that is even though we added 5 police and 8 fire, it would seem like it would have been not the same.
Last year, police was 27.81% of the budget, and this year they're 27.87%. The $300,000 is not a big impact on an, $18 million budget?
You have those slides I asked for? They're not slides, but those comparisons?
They're not in this presentation.
You don't have them with you? Which one of the budget folks prepared those?
The line chart?
Didn't we see an increasing commitment to public safety?
Yes.
Okay.
Over the
I think-
3-year period, yes.
Okay.
Well, I think we really want to talk a 1-year period, only because of the following is that we added 5 more officers and we added 8 more. So you wouldn't have had that in 2 years ago, so I would think that those numbers would have changed,
Go up, huh?
and particularly if you combine the two. Okay, so the next slide. Wait a minute. And stay on that slide a minute. Define what government is on here.
Yes, ma'am. That would be city manager's office, city council, internal auditor, HR, finance, all those government admin type services, city attorney, municipal court. This slide shows our expenditures by category, with personnel making the largest percentage at 70.66%. Operations and maintenance at 23.8%. Transfers at 4.57%, and then, of course, capital at less than 1%.
What was personnel last year?
$70.83%.
73.86.
70.83.
Okay, and that is, Lane, I think the number you're referring to is the number when we approved the budget, what it was, but what they've done is taken out a couple of the insurances out of there, so that's basically, you're looking at 7.83
72 in
versus
my
7.
mind. I
Yeah,
couldn't
that's
remember
why.
what that was sticking
Yeah,
to.
that's why. Okay. Any other questions from council or comments from council? Tom?
Question on the personnel.
Yes.
That does include more PD and more fire department, correct?
That includes the 5 additional police officers. And then, of course, the 5 officers we added last year and the 8 firefighters that we added last year.
Thank you.
Yes. So here we have some other potential opportunities for council to discuss. Of course, we've already included the 5 police officers in your proposed budget. We also will discuss salary adjustments, health insurance, the fire safer grant, and the peak hours ambulance. So we're in year 2 of a 4-year plan to increase the number of police officers. In year 1, last year, we added 5 officers for a cost of $320,000. In year 2, we proposed adding 5 officers for a cost of $330,000. This is expected for them to reach staffing levels of 1.75. Authorized positions.
All right, so, so what we need to discuss now then are these 5 items, is that right, in detail?
Yes, ma'am, and we have slides for each of them. Would you like me to move on to the next
Yeah,
slide?
let's go ahead
Okay.
and do that.
So starting off with salaries, the police department has proposed a loyalty pay plan and steps. Year 1 of that would cost $478,000. Year 2 would be an additional $232,000 for a total of $710,000. And year 3 would be an additional $175,000 for a total of $885,000. The cost of the pay plan in the first year is equivalent to a 3.8% raise, were we to give the police department a raise in lieu of this pay plan.
I have a question, Mayor.
Yes, please, Billy.
Tina, in year 1, the 477,817, does that give every police officer an increase?
I would defer to the police department to answer that question. This was created and proposed by them, and so I'm not as familiar with it as they are. Oh, I guess I can show you this slide.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Chief.
Morning, Mayor. Good morning,
Morning.
Council.
Morning.
Roughly 53 employees, sworn employees, will be receiving less than a 2% increase. And those are going to,
Everybody, Chief.
nobody will lose money, but 53 employees will receive less than 2% of an increase.
How
And
many
those are
employees?
the officers that are in the academy and those that are on probation or recently got off probation.
So how many total employees are there?
Sworn employees, 169.
Okay. And of the 5 additional officers that were approved for fiscal year 18,
Correct.
17, 18, were we able to hire those 5 additional, and are they still with us?
We did. At one point in time, we were at 1,674. City manager does have the authority to authorize 5% over the strength that y'all have given us. We started the academy with 13. We ended the academy with 6 due to different things.
And so you were able to get 6 out of the academy. Did we lose some on the other end?
Yes,
Okay, so about how many?
roughly about 5 due to
So we
retirement.
Kind of netted out with 1.
That's correct.
Over
We've
the
got an
previous
academy
year.
that just started, and we've got a test coming up in October. So we'll be running simultaneous academies, trying to get our strength up to these numbers if you authorize the other 5 bodies.
So legitimately for 17, 18, we got 1 more netted.
Yes, ma'am.
1 more, regardless of the area they
That's
came
correct.
from.
And I knew this process would take several years, adding an additional 5 officers. In 2016, our authorized strength was 165, and I've always been wanting to have a working 165 on the street. That doesn't include the ones in the academy and/or out in the PTO program.
Chief Carter,
Yes, ma'am.
what's the length of time it takes to get an officer through everything once they finish the academy to get them on the street?
Pretty close to a year. Between the hiring process, the academy, and the field training program, right about 1 year. We have cut down our hiring process that used to extend 6 months. We cut that down to 3 months.
Do I have questions from council? So right now, just to review the numbers, if the loyalty pay plan and steps is considered and approved, year one would be a $477,817, year two, $232,000, and year three, $174,000. So in a 3-year window, just on the loyalty pay and steps would be a combined $884,956, right? Am I
Yes,
correct?
yes, ma'am, that's
So-
what was presented to us, yes.
Tina, would you go back to that other slide that shows the individual percentages? Chief, just a real quick question here, just so that I can answer the citizens out there. It appears like in a lot of these things that the higher you go up the scale, the greater that increase in percentages are. Can you address that? I mean, as to what the citizens see?
That's correct. What you're seeing there is supervisory positions, and the majority of those employees are tenured employees. The loyalty plan is based on seniority. As you see there, I'll use me for a reference. I'm a 26-year employee. So you basically get $300 per year per service. So do the math, 26 years times $300. So the same with assistant chiefs. One's back here, he's got 33 years of service. So it's based on loyalty. It's based on seniority. That's why you see the upper end of our department receiving more of a percentage than the lower end.
What gets a little confusing is if you look at PO1, 70.72%, then it goes up PO2, 5%, then down to 3%, then up to 3, a little more than 3, and then down to 2%. It seems a little odd. Can you go through why that is?
I'll have to ask Nolan, our budget analyst, to come forward.
While he's on his way, Chief, would you say that this plan would help with retention?
I think it will, and it also helps. Many officers were frozen in steps through meet and confer. As you know, the contract ended in October 2017. We were asked by city staff to come up with a pay plan, in which we did. This was fabricated back in April. I stand behind it. This is something that the fire department has been receiving since 2014. This plan is very comparable to the fire department's, with the exception that it does have some steps. Our pay plan years ago started with 24 steps. Meet and confer, it reduced it to 13 steps. This plan reduces it to 6 steps. So,
Let me just ask one other question. Based off of the question about loyalty and sticking with it and going through it, my gut instinct, and that doesn't mean it's correct, my gut instinct would be that you would lose more people in the PO1, 2, 3, and 4 more than you're going to lose them at sergeant up to chief. It would seem that to me.
we would hope not. We hope this
What does the trend,
encourages
yeah.
people to actually promote, because there are step increases there. So.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So the differences that you're seeing at each step, to move into the different steps, it's going to be year-based. So for example, to move from PO1, those are our officers that have invested 2 to 4 years with our agency. Once you hit that PO2 step, that's when you've hit year 4, and you won't move out of PO2 until you hit year 7. So these steps are kind of rooted in the number of years that they've been with our agency, and that's where the movement comes. Now, the reason that you're seeing those weird numbers, the increases and decreases between the steps, is you're seeing that in some cases, we had gaps in service in some of our officers. So that became a really difficult thing to work through, because we start seeing, okay, these people have gaps in service. So what is their total service date with the city? And then what's their actual hire date or anniversary date? How do we reconcile that to prevent them from taking a pay cut through this? Because if we base it solely on years, it becomes really difficult to make sure that we don't have any zero men that are just going to net zero or anybody taking a loss. So at some steps, we really had to look and go line by line, person by person, and ensure that those people weren't going to take a loss. So in some of those steps, you have a few lateral transfers. A PO6 is going to be one of those where you see that 3.98% raise. That's the most significant increase that you'll see when you move from step 5 to step 6. But it's not as significant as we would have liked it to be, because in that step alone, we have a number of lateral transfers that are experiencing that gap in service where we really had to kind of set the bases where they feel like they are getting an increase when they move steps, because that's important. That's one of the biggest retention procedures that we have. When you move steps, do you feel like you're getting the raise that you're entitled to, the raise that you deserve? Also, every year they're going to get that $300 for that additional year in service. So we want to make sure that they understand that. You're going to get that loyalty pay. Every year that you serve our agency, you're going to get that $300. And so they need to have that in the back of their mind. But at the same time, we're setting the basis to be competitive with benchmark cities, which is important because we want to keep them here. We invest a lot of time and a lot of capital into training these employees. We want to do as best as we can to set those bases competitively, but not set them at a level where we can no longer afford our personnel. So that became the issue in setting these bases. So that's why you're seeing the numbers where they're at.
Where do you lose most people? Is it in the first 2 to 4 years?
Yes, ma'am, especially in this case.
So that becomes the question then, if we lose more of them in the PO1 area in the 2 to 4 years, I'm going to talk out loud because I have to make sure I understand.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you go from year 2 to year 3, you get a bump, and year 3 to year 4, you get a bump.
Yes, ma'am.
So even though it's 2 to 4 years, every year there's an increase.
Yes,
ma'am. And here's why it gets confusing, because if you have the lowest percentage on the lowest level of salary, it's the smallest dollar amount that you receive. Unlike if you're at the higher level, because of years of service, you get a larger percent, which means a larger dollar increase. So how does this keep people here?
So number one, the reason that the lower ranks are going to show a lower increase is because from the time that they start out as a recruit to the time that they get off of probation, they're going to see about a $6,000 raise. So when you're talking a salary of about $42,000 a year, that's a rough amount, about $42,000 a year for a recruit salary. From the time that they start as a recruit when they're hired to the time that they get off of probation, they're going to see in that 2 years about a $6,000 raise, which if you talk about 1/7 of your salary, that's a pretty significant increase over the period of 2 years compared to what general employees get or employees receive in general. So that's going to be kind of your first thing. So that's how we try to keep the people at the lowest level, the recruits moving through the PO process. We try to keep them here that way. You're going to get that increase when you come off of probation, and you're going to get that increase when you hit year 2. $3,000 when you come off of probation and $3,000 when you hit year 2. But the percentage increase is going to be lower at the lower ranks, because as you start to move through those ranks and as you start to move through those steps, those people are going to have more years. And when you start talking in terms of $300 per year of service, that's significant. And generally, your more tenured employees are going to promote. In his case, 26 years, or in the case of one of our assistant chiefs, 33. The dollar amount is most significant at the top of our organization. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that would mean that from going from recruit to probation is a 14% increase.
Relatively, yes, ma'am, 1/7.
And then from that 14% increase, there's another $3,000. So you're now at $48,000 as probation, and then as you go from $48,000 probation to 1, you get another $3,000. So you go in $42,000 to $51,000 in what time period?
The steps, I can go grab them just here for a second so you can see the years. Yes, ma'am. Let me grab those for you.
Mayor, while we're waiting
ma'am.
for that, I'd like to ask Tina a question. Tina, in year 1, what would be the total salaries for the police department? I know implementing this program would be 477,817, but what would be the total dollars for year one?
Okay, let me make that calculation for
Okay,
you.
thank you.
That is, it would be $17,322,000.
Say again?
$17,322,529.
And that number is what?
That would be the salary budget for police if we included this amount. And that does also, of course, include the 5 additional officers as well.
So with that, what percentage is that to the total plan then? Because based off of the original, the general fund expenditures by category, we have police at 27.87%.
Frank, if you don't mind, do you see some savings? I mean, is there anything here that this program improves over what you currently have, or is there a way where it helps us that we aren't seeing here? I mean, is there something we're not asking that we need to ask? Is there something here that we don't see? I mean, you're looking at retention and ways to improve this, and we know it's hard to get people on, especially if it takes a year to go.
Sure. And this is just the first step. As you know, Meet and Confer had all control over this other than this year. So this is just one step that we're working on in the future. There's more incentives that I would like to be more competitive or comparable with fire department. Keep in mind, we haven't got there yet, but I know it's been introduced or possibly introduced a 2% raise for employees. This plan is $477,000. If you subtract the 2% that you would or possibly give police department, that's roughly $230,000. So you're only talking about a difference of $200,000 in change to implement the program.
But but we're not meet and confer, are we?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. It's strictly on my shoulders right now.
And I will say that the chief and I and the assistant chiefs meet every Friday. So there's issues that are brought up that we address. We come back and I address it again the following week. So anything really that pops up, I think it's worked really well. I'm very appreciative of the chief and what they've done as far as the cutbacks on the overtime and other initiatives that we're working on, and we'll continue working on those on a weekly basis when we meet for coffee. So the coffee's pretty good, by the way. But anyway, it's been pretty good, and we'll continue that going.
Follow up with your questions in this year's budget. I mean, there's money available at the end of the year to actually fund this, but I've been told that through salary savings and fuel savings, it'll be rolled back over to the rainy day fund or the leftover fund for next
So
year.
go back through that again, Chief Carter. Could you talk through that number again that what
Salary
you just
savings and fuel savings costs.
Yes.
I'll revert to Nolan on exact figures. I've got a good figure in my mind, but he's more exact.
Okay.
Fuel savings.
So just due to vacancies that we've had both in our civilian accounts, the police department is one of those kind of complex animals where we actually have public safety communications, which are going to be one entity in and of itself, and then you have our police budget. And when we start looking at our salary employees, we separate and we delineate our civilian employees and our sworn employees, two separate salary accounts. So whenever we have vacancies there, we kind of have to look at it on a holistic level and see how much savings do we have, and then what is a use that we can, how can we use those savings? We run a program called Traffic Safety Program. So we do everything that we can to try to cut back in our general overtime overtime as a result of criminal homicide, overtime as a result of special events that go on with the school district or the boat races or any kind of parades. That really makes a significant impact on our bottom line. And every time that we're having to, staff these events and have full-time employees out there, it creates a significant impact and a financial burden on our organization. So then what we have to do at that point is be as conservative as we can, and the chief has taken measures to reduce the detectives' shifts from the 10-hour shifts to the 8-hour shifts, and reduce our patrol shifts from the 4 10s to the 12. So we're hoping that these measures that we take are going to get us to where we need to be in our savings levels, to where we can roll back some of that money into the general fund and have more of a fund balance for our organization so that we're not operating at a deficit each year.
Mayor, this year we're planning on capturing some of those savings, especially we talked about the sales tax revenues coming in probably about $1.4 million in excess. So they have a dire need for vehicles that need to be addressed. Typically, we'll purchase about 12 vehicles per year. They have some Chargers that they've had a lot of problems with, and I hate to say that it's a Dodge product because that's what I drive, but that's been a real issue. So this year, what we're going to be projecting, what we're going to be planning for, is to purchase an additional 12 vehicles to make sure that those vehicles that are broken down, always at the shop and slowing down the progress of the police department, are actually replaced. So we'll talk a little bit later about that, about being able to use those monies toward that, but that's something that we want to make sure we commit to as well.
Yes, Billy, go ahead.
I was just going to ask Nolan.
Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned sworn officers versus non-sworn officers. Where do they fit in this list, or how are we taking care of them? What's your proposal?
Okay, so the sworn employees are covered under this pay plan.
Okay.
So your sworn employees are going to be your patrol officers, your detectives, your supervisors, anybody who wears a badge and acts in a police capacity is going to be your sworn employee.
Okay.
The police department also has 35 civilian employees, so maintenance technicians, crime scene investigators, myself, administrative staff that also support the organization. They are subject to whatever raises the general employees receive. So when y'all make a decision to, award general raises, that applies to the other 35 employees at the department.
Oh, okay, all
Yes, ma'am.
right.
So I guess to answer your question, civilian employees are not included in this pay plan.
Okay. I'm not really sure how to ask this question, so I hope I don't step out of line here. But if we, move forward looking at this police loyalty plan and consider looking at a favorable result for this that you have on the screen now, and look at the 35 non-sworn officers under a different plan, but not to include this, what would that mean for you, Chief? Maybe that's a question for you. And I understand what the mayor said, we're not making a decision here. But just, for my clarity, is when we do have to make a decision, so say your sworn officers, can I say if this is voted on and approved, can I say that without being illegal? If this is sworn on and approved, voted on and approved. Okay, but say we vote in favor of this. The 35 sworn officers, as I understood what Nolan said, would get
No, ma'am.
No, those are not.
Those are
support
not
staff.
support
I'm
staff.
sorry,
And
I just
those are
rephrased
civilian
that.
employees. Yes, ma'am.
Civilian employees, I'm sure you feel they're entitled to something. So say that we voted on a 2% increase for them only, but not for this. What would be your response, Chief?
I'm fine with that. I think every employee in the city deserves more, but I do realize that it boils down to money. But I would be content with this, with the sworn officer, and 2% for my civilian staff at this point.
Okay, all right. Because I just noticed that we have a 3.8% raise with this 477 as we've been presented.
That's the average. Our numbers were actually 3.3 on the average. Okay. And again, like I said, 53 of the sworn will be receiving less than 2%.
Okay.
But this is a starting point, and it's based on seniority, it's based on longevity, and whether y'all grant a raise from years on forward, they'll at least receive $300 a year.
Yeah, that was going to be my question or comment is that adopting this loyalty pay plan might in fact mean that the loyalty pay plan is the only raise and that there wouldn't be additional raises on top of the loyalty plan.
That's strictly up to council.
Right? It's a general conversation.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And we looked at that 53 employee that's getting less per 2% and tried to give them additional 1%, but with being civil service, you all have to pay them fairly, so we were unable to do that.
So you are strongly proposing adoption of the loyalty pay plan versus a normal percent increase yearly.
I don't want to be greedy, but in a perfect world, I'd like to see this in a 1% raise, which will balance the 53 employees that aren't receiving the 2%.
Okay.
I guess I have,
Gary?
since
Yes.
you brought that up, Mayor, I guess I'd ask what that difference is from that 477 to a flat 2%.
Roughly 230,000.
Yes, Lucy, please.
Nola, when you were doing this step, figuring out these steps, you have the longevity in there already, and then you have the education also for whoever, you know, and also the language, right? So all those three things are already added in there. When let's say for instance, when somebody gets an increase of 3 point whatever one of the officers may get, does that include this stuff and their salary that they have now, or just the salary by itself?
In other words, she's asking if, in fact, this loyalty pay plan is inclusive of the already approved language steps, or whatever steps, I guess you call them, and the education level 2. So are those inclusive in this, or those also?
In addition to this,
In addition to
we
this,
have
so you have
bilingual,
that.
and we have SWAT and H&T pay. They receive $100 a month if you're an active member in SWAT and H&T, and or if you speak bilingual. That's in addition to this loyalty plan.
Yeah, and what I was trying to find out was, so whenever they have let's say, a basic pay, do you get your 3% from the basic pay, or is it all together and you get the raise from everything together? Like, is it separate, or is it all together?
Is it base pay, or is it base pay plus the language plus the education? So
revert.
if let's say, if it's your $1,000 as a base, does this percent increase take place on the $1,000 or the $1,200?
Should be all together. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tina. It's all together. Annual benefits.
So then the 477,817 was what you're asking, Lucy, if that's also, the dollar amount is inclusive of the $100 a month for the bilingual and the $100 a month for the language. So that's
correct.
inclusive in the 477,817.
Yes, and I believe in the 477, that includes the 5 additional officers this year if authorized. Is that correct, Tina?
What was your question? I'm sorry.
The 477 includes 5 additional officers this year if authorized by council.
Nolan, did you include the 5 additional officers in there? Yes.
But the 5 additional officers wouldn't get a loyalty pay,
Until they get off probation.
which would happen, let's say they're hired October 1.
They'll get it the following year.
So it wouldn't be inclusive in this budget because they wouldn't get that until the 2019-2020 budget.
That's correct.
That's correct. There should be no increase because of those officers, but they are still included in the plan.
They're included in the employee plan, but they're not included in the loyalty plan.
There is no increase in the loyalty
Yeah,
plan
that's,
due to those
yeah,
officers. Yes,
that's exactly the
correct.
question.
You know, we would see the projection as far as those new officers would be in years 2, 3.
That's
And that's where
correct.
you see that, so, okay.
Just to be clear.
And if you go back to the previous slide in year 3, the actual increase is less than given a 2% raise if we didn't receive any raises for the next 3 years. It's $123,000 for year 3 if we didn't receive a 2%, which is $230,000.
And that's important information to understand and know as we look down the road, because obviously sitting here today, we don't know what's going to happen in 2019, 2020. But it's a good comment because the percentage for the loyalty pay we're talking about today is not the same percentage that you would be getting in year 2 and year 3 is the point. And so it would be not as big of a percent increase. Correct. Thank you for that comment. Yes,
May I
Billy.
ask Nolan one other question? Nolan, you mentioned benchmark cities. What benchmark cities did you use?
Well, we use the same benchmark cities that y'all use for general employees. So, for instance, I know that some of our benchmarks include like Wichita Falls and Denton, stuff of that nature. And we kind of deferred to human resources on that when we looked at the basis.
Did you include Midland, Odessa?
Yes, ma'am.
Because one of the problems is, you know, Midland is 2.5 times the sales and property tax that we have, or sales tax that we have, and Odessa's 2.49 or something like that. So the question mark becomes if you, and this is just a general statement, if I make $250,000 a year and you make $100,000 a year, there's no way we can afford to buy the same house. So I want to make sure when we're looking at benchmark cities that we're realistic about what we're doing, because if you take a look at Midland, they have over $12 billion in property tax. We have less than $5 billion in property tax. An apartment or a home in Midland is significantly more expensive than it is here in San Angelo, if you can find one. So I want to make sure when we use benchmark that we're realistic about what benchmark means. Just because they're in our region doesn't mean that they're comparable to us, because we don't take into that cost of living. And we don't have the sales tax nor the property tax that they have.
Chief, I want to go back.
Yes.
I'll agree with you, Mayor, but from the public safety standpoint, we base everything on population. Number of citizens per officer or per fireman. More direct, the last time I looked, Billy, Councilman DeWitt, benchmark cities, Abilene is one of them, and I compare a lot of things to Abilene. In 2016, we're roughly 89 to 93% of the median of the benchmark cities.
Tom,
Yes, sir.
you told me you had a question or comment?
Chief, you said in a perfect world, you'd give an addition.
Loyalty and 1%.
Now, the 1% number we've got in here, I don't think we've gotten there yet, shows 123,000. Is that for every position that you have, or is that just
That
your
would be just
35?
the sworn employees.
That's just your sworn.
Yes, which leaves out the 35, which would get, if authorized, I know we're ahead of the schedule, but if authorized, to 2%. Non-sworn employees, 2%.
Those employees, Tommy, are included in your general employee
Okay.
calculation.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Chief.
One last final, Nolan, before you leave, Frank. When we originally looked at this early in the year, there were some people that this didn't fit in the curve to. How did you adjust for them?
We did, and most of them were the laterals
Okay.
that left or were hired, left, and came back. We actually zero balanced them like the fire department did. And keep in mind with this, we retracted just about everybody's base pay and then added back the loyalty pay. So that's something to understand as well. If we would have just kept their flat base pay, this plan would have been enormous, impossible, and I wouldn't even bring it to your attention. It would have been millions of dollars.
Explain that again, Frank. I'm a little confused.
When we started looking at this base, so you take, Officer A, for example, who was a lateral transfer, so he has that gap in service. So how do you look at their number of years when you're putting them in a base? With their salary, the way that it is structured now, if we were to implement this pay plan as it was proposed originally to you all, they would have taken a pretty significant pay cut. I mean, we're talking in the neighborhood of $3,000 to $4,000, some people. So we had to look at those line by line and ensure that we placed them in an appropriate step where they would either A, be netting zero, so their take-home salary is the same, because we don't want anybody's take-home salary to go down. So under this proposed plan, I want to clarify that no officer's take-home salary will go down. That is something that we were really diligent about. That's important to us. That's priority one. And then number two, on that same respect is going line by line and ensuring that they're placed in the appropriate step. And so when we start to look at those who are lateral and have that gap in service, are we placing them in the appropriate step? And they were vetted. You know, we had multiple parties and multiple city departments look at these steps to ensure that we were, you know, operating in accordance with civil service law, that we were ensuring that everybody's base pay is the same. But, you know, when we say we're rolling back your base pay, it almost translates into, well, we're giving you a pay cut, which is not the case at all. Because when you roll back their base pay, currently they're not receiving that $300 per year. So if I roll back the chief's base pay by $2,000, but the chief has 26 years of loyalty service, well, 26 times $300. I decrease your base pay by $2,000, but I increase your loyalty pay that you're not currently getting now by $7,800. Well, that's a significant difference. You're going to net about $5,800. I don't want to oversimplify it, but that's kind of, to put it into kind of broad terms, that's what we're looking at.
So when you talk about lateral, you're talking about somebody from Abilene with 5 years service coming to San Angelo with 5 years service? Is that what you're talking about when you talk about lateral?
Both those that come into our agency from other agencies that are already certified, and then those who may have been employed with our agency, sought employment elsewhere, and then returned to our agency to come back to work. They had that gap in service, but will use their original anniversary date with us in determining their loyalty pay. Yes, ma'am.
We have a lot of that?
We have about a handful of them. I know just off the top of my head, we have at least 7 or 8 of them that were kind of our problem children when we were developing this plan, that we had to really make sure we were taking care of them throughout this process.
So that speaks great leadership, because you had 7 or 8 people who left and couldn't wait to come back.
That's right.
That's great. Do I have further questions from council? All right, move on.
Thank you, Chief and Nolan.
So we have also, for your information, the cost of a 1% and 2% raise for the fire department. You can see there that that cost would be $226,000 as we've proposed in this current budget. Any questions on that slide?
I think someone should come forward so we could, if we do have questions.
Morning, Mayor, Council.
Hi, Brian, how are you? Okay, so talk to us about the fire department.
What you have proposed here at the 1% and 2% raise, and I know the last year the city gave some differing raises throughout the ranks, and a lot of the personnel would like to fix a compression issue that they have, and their fix actually costs less than the 2% raise that is proposed here. And I would like to have Mason Matthews come up and speak a little bit about it.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So we, as Chief Dunn said, some of those raises last year, our lowest ranks being hosman and driver, received 9% and 10%. And that created a compression issue between the next 3 ranks, which is lieutenant, captain, and battalion chief. We had maintained a 13 to 15% differential between every rank. By those 2 bottom ranks receiving those, which was good. It was good for retaining those bottom ranks. But now it's about a 5% differential between that driver moving up to lieutenant. So what we've done is we've put together, if we could, you know, again, very grateful that we were thought about last year, very grateful looking at this, but we would like to possibly allocate that 2% just to those 3, those top 3 ranks, being lieutenant, captain, and battalion chief. The numbers we put together are, like I said, it totals with the benefits included about $223,000.
So the majority of your group
yes,
is
yes.
good with that? Mason?
Yes, sir. So we, as an association, every year vote on priorities. We bring decide what is our number one, number two, number three. I think we had 5 in 2018. But our number one was to fix this compression issue. About 140 members of a 170-person fire department, and that was our number one priority, was to try and fix this compression issue.
So let me make sure we're really clear. The 2% increase of the 226,667 is only for a small part of the entire fire department.
3 of the 5 ranks.
3 of the 5 ranks. And of 3 of the 5 ranks, how many of the 3 of the 5 ranks, what is the number of the 3 versus the number of the 5 in terms of total employees?
So you have, of those 3 ranks, you have 20 lieutenants, you have 12 captains, and 4 battalion chiefs.
You have 36 people.
Yes, ma'am.
And then of the 5, the difference between the 3 and the 5?
In total of number of personnel?
Yes, sir.
50 drivers and 78 firefighters or hosesmen.
So there's a total, so you have 128 plus 36 is a total number of employees in the fire department? So you have 164 employees.
Exactly.
171 total.
So the totally 171 employees. And so what you're proposing on this 667,000 is that those dollars are going to go to the 36 people only.
Yes, ma'am.
And everyone in the fire department is happy with that.
Well, well, not happy. I wouldn't say happy, but let me just kind of chime in real quick. Every month I meet with the association membership and the chiefs. We call it a solutions meeting. I serve as a facilitator. I've been very impressed with the association, with the meetings that we have and the requests that they make. This is a perfect example of what I've seen as well. Their heart's in it. As far as the service, you talk about civil service. This is really what impresses me about these guys, is that they're looking at the overall good of the organization, and they're looking at the overall good of their department as well. And that's exactly what I've seen. And this doesn't surprise me really that you come up here. I wish that I could tell you right now, Mason, especially your firefighters that are here right now, that we could do 2% increase for everyone and fix also the compression issue. But it really is kind of tight this year. I know last year we looked at some of the things that we could do, and we did the 9 and 10% increase for those the lower ranks, and we got those additional 8 firefighters. But I can't express enough to you guys how appreciative I am of y'all. I mean, this is really sacrificial, and I really appreciate that you guys thought of this as well. It makes the decisions up here a little bit easier, especially when we have a very tight budget. But again, kudos to you. I mean, I think I've spoken y'all's praises to the council members and others that I talked to, but I thank you for this.
Once again, I want to compliment you on the leadership that took you to get to this point, because it takes great leadership to work with a group of people, 171 employees, and come up with this game plan. So huge compliments.
I think the reason these guys are looking at this, when we put the loyalty plan in place in 2014, it fixed some serious compression issues within the fire department. And as long as those future raises were given across the board between those 5 ranks, it always kept that cushion in there. Well, last year, as Mason said, they appreciate that, but those 2 bottom ranks got significantly larger raises than the lieutenant, captain, and bat chief. And what it did was squash that down to where it made it to where there's not the gap there. And in our loyalty pay plan, we removed all steps from our loyalty pay plan. You have one base pay for everyone in that rank, and then loyalty pay on that. So
Smart.
It's very easy. It's very easy to work. It makes it easy for the budgeting people to take care of.
Thank you again. Great leadership and thinking through the plan and thinking through and valuing each of your employees. So it's greatly appreciated. Thank you. Billy, do you have a question?
Mason, what feedback are we likely to get from the 128 folks that may not get anything?
Well, so we've been, like I said, when we vote on these priorities, we put it out. We have lots of talks and discussion about what is number 1, what is number 2, what is number 3. Like I said, we're Once that priority list, and this is just as the association, because we do have members that are not in the association. When we set those priorities, we have gone for 12 months and sat in front of administration and Mr. Valenzuela and talking about how can we do this, so I guess there is a lot of those people that stand and not get anything that voted for this, and a lot of those are going to be in that bottom rank that said they appreciated it last year and they understood that there is now a problem, and they're looking after our brother and sisters and saying, now it's time to do the right thing this year, and let's try to fix that and create or keep that incentive to promote.
Thank you. Can we move into talk about the Fire Safer grant, please?
Okay, so the Fire Safer grant is for personnel for the fire department, and we laid that out several months ago when we came forward to ask you to apply for that. And it's 8 additional firefighters for the fire department in 2 spots, the back of the aerial, which is one of our most complex pieces of equipment, and a battalion chief driver. And these are both national standards, and we set forth a lot of comparison with how it's done in everywhere else and what the NFPA standard is for that. So the cost for this is, if we get the grant, and we don't know that we got the grant yet or not, they have reached out to us and asked us a lot of additional questions that they've never have asked us in the past. So if we did get the grant, the year 1 match for the city would be $150,000. It'd be an additional $150,000 in year, no, $150,000 in 2, $390,000 match in year 3, and then each subsequent year, it would be roughly the $600,000 going forward for those 8 personnel.
I have great concerns about us approving things today that have such a significant impact on our budget going forward, because we don't know from a budget perspective where the revenue stream will go. So when you start talking about this and the additional cost of this, you're adding a lot to the budget in future years, and that doesn't even include anything as it relates to existing employees and raises. So I'm very cautious about this SAFER grant. I'm not sure I support it, and I'm very concerned about what it obligates us to in the future.
Well, I would say this would be kind of like the 5 additional police officers over the 4 years for the police department, getting us to the manning point that we need to be.
Did we just add 8 last year?
That was on the ambulance side. Yes, ma'am.
I've been told that before we finish this up, we'll take a vote real quick. We can take a vote on this. Do we want a break? I've been told people want a break. And so before we continue, do we want a break?
Yes.
Yes? So we're going to take a break at this very moment. Okay?
Very long.
For 10 minutes. 10 minutes, okay? You're back on.
All right. I had a couple more comments to make about this. This SAFER grant, or these positions, was actually the number 2 priority that the guys coming to Solution Committee brought forward. Part of it is because of the safety aspects of what those 2 spots do for that. The other thing I wanted to say was that the last time we actually added personnel to the firefighting side was back in 2002 or 3 when we added Station 8. The other additions through the years have been on the ambulance side to deal with the rising amount of ambulance runs that we've had over those years.
Trying to find a page real quick. Give me a second. I know, but I'm looking for a different page that I made notes on. So hold on. Okay, so and this might be under a different conversation of peak hours ambulance, but my question is, when you say the unit hour utilization is currently 0.03138, and your goal is to get 0.18 to 0.24, which is a big slide, what is that calculation?
Let me get my file. last year you asked me, Mayor, how you would calculate this versus the old method of doing things, which was purely based on the amount of runs. Well, this is the current standard to determine how much your ambulance is being used. And this comes out from fire engineering is who does this. So what this calculation is the total amount of hours. So if you have 1 hour, one ambulance that is in service 24 hours a day, 365, it'd be 24 times the 365 for the amount of hours for that.
Okay.
And then multiply it by the amount of ambulances we have. Divided by, you go in there, and what I have on that is the amount of time we're out of service for emergency response time and the amount of time it takes to do the paperwork, which I averaged it to about 20 minutes, which is probably less than it actually takes them, but it makes that number a little bit lower. So that doesn't include their mandatory PT time, their training time, or their time to prepare the ambulances. That is purely emergency response time to come to that calculation.
Okay, and this current calculation would not include, of course, the new ambulance that we bought because it has not been delivered yet. So this is a number calculated prior to what will happen when the new ambulance gets here.
This number that is sitting there right now is 5 frontline ambulances with the peak. The calculation with those same runs on the average part, if you have 6 and no peak, would be 0.2811, and if you continue with 6 with the peak, it would be 0.264569.
Okay, and when you say the 6, you're talking about the ambulance that's not here yet.
The ambulance is here. My personnel aren't trained. You asked
Okay.
PD how long it took to train personnel. Well, for the fire department, if you include the processing application period, it's 28 months for me to, from the time I give a test until the time I roll personnel out that are usable. Because it's about 8 months worth of process time, and our rookie school is 18 months, 8 hours a day, and that's when they roll out of that, hopefully passing their test at that point.
Okay, so I was under the understanding that we hadn't received the ambulance. It's really the reverse. We have the ambulance. What we don't have, or we're taking the existing staff to cover the 6th ambulance versus having the new 8 people trained to take care of the ambulance runs.
We are not running a 6th out ambulance right now. The ambulance is there. We could have, if we had the people, we could have manned a reserve ambulance. That's why I said last year, it's the time that it takes once I hire them to get them ready. If we were manning a 6th ambulance, we'd be hiring overtime. We're manning a peak through that overtime. But if we were manning a 6th frontline ambulance, we would be hiring overtime on multiple occasions just to get that done. That's what those personnel are for.
Okay, so then, with that said, so this says, of course, other potential opportunities, continuation of peak hours in ambulance, and a cost would be $258,804 using overtime. So is that assuming that these other are still not ready?
They will not
New
be
ones?
ready until June of 2019. We hired them in December of 2017, when y'all on
Yeah,
that budget
okay.
year. So they will not be ready until that point in time. We are running the peak ambulance, if it gets staffed from 9 to 6, Monday through 7 days a week. I can tell you that it, prior to putting the peak in service, we had shut down a fire truck in 2016, 170-something times. In 17, it lowered because we'd started using the peak. And during this last time frame, when I ran it from August 1 of 17 through July 31, we'd only shut down a fire truck 55 times during that period. So you can see the impact that the peak ambulance is having for us as far as shutting down fire suppression. Because if we run out of ambulances, which means all 5 ambulances are out on runs at the same time, we start shutting down fire trucks to make those medical runs in that area, which means that 1/8 of the city is lacking fire protection for that period of time.
Okay, Okay, so where this says cost would be 258,804, is that basically the dollars of overtime that you've had in the 2017-18?
That is if it gets staffed every day. So there's a sign-up list. Some days it doesn't get staffed, like a Saturday or a Sunday, maybe people don't sign up to staff it, so we run without a peak that day. This amount covers 7 days a week for a year of overtime.
But we've not had to do that before, is what you're saying?
Well, we've been running it, since y'all voted for it, in October 1 of last year, we've been running it since then.
7 days a week?
Well, if it's staffed, yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
So I guess my question is,
That's the maximum cost it would be to man it every day for a year.
okay, so maximum, but in 2017-18, what has been our overtime cost for manning it? Because I would assume if that's what we're projecting, the overtime would be in this current budget, would basically mean that that's what we had in actual overtime expenses this most current year.
We have
That
a lot of,
overtime is probably lumped in with,
yeah, it blends
total.
in with minimum manning, FLSA overtime, it blends in, it's in there with all that, so.
So then
what
your-
percentage of the days do you have accrued? What percentage of that 7 day week do you typically?
Usually Monday through Friday, it's always staff, which is good because you have everybody out working. And if you look at the run volume, I've broken the run volume down on an hourly basis when I looked at it. And during those times when everybody's out and about, and you can see it sharply fall off a little after 7 something at night, or basically it starts going down drastically.
What I'm trying to get at is an answer to the mayor's question about what percentage of the 258 do we think we would actually have to spend?
Almost always Monday through Friday. So usually if it's not staffed, it's a Saturday and Sunday, and it just depends.
Well, then let me ask you, this is maybe a more direct way to ask the question. Based off of your actual cost, employee costs in 2017-18, based off of actuals through July plus projected August, September, is the 258,000 we're looking at here the same 258,000 that's in total employee cost in the current budget?
this amount is not included in the current proposed budget.
So if you take a look then at 2017-18's actuals or projected, or the actuals through August plus your, or July plus your August and September, we're basically saying in that number is the overtime that was required expense-wise to man the ambulances in 2017-18. So if that's true, then this 258,000 would be over and above the projected 2017-18 numbers, even though those are, so it's 258,000 more on top of.
That amount was authorized last year, and it was a different amount last year, but the program was authorized last year by council. It was not in the original budget. It was an amendment to the original budget, so it's in the current budget.
All right, so with that amended budget,
And
this
the reason-
number would be in that number. And the
Yes,
same.
and the reason for that is that we proposed the one-time funding source rather than adding it to the actual budget because it's meant at this point in time to be a temporary measure.
So those costs are actually for that window of time in the existing actual.
Yes, ma'am.
Plus, they probably would be going down with your class graduating in the May, June timeframe, because you won't have so much overtime, because now you can be able to staff it. Is that
Well,
correct?
once they're out, we'll go to a 6th frontline ambulance instead of that. Right now, we're running the 5 frontline and the peak during those from 9 to 6 every day.
The overtime number, though, would not be as great, because you're only using 8 or 9 months out of this fiscal year compared to,
And I'd have to go back and look and see if we did it for 9 months versus a year.
All right, so then there's a comment recommended fund with Medicaid supplements. So what is that?
The Medicaid supplement is a monies that comes back from the federal government through the state for Medicaid patients, underinsured, uninsured patients that we haul. It is usually, we'll file it for our fiscal year that ends September 30th. We have to have our paperwork in by March, April of 19. We will know the number that we'll get back in about October of next year. So it's at least a year time we get the money. We know we got money coming again, like last year.
And we will
for
have
this.
money. We're actually proposing this current fiscal year's receipt, and that is probably in excess of $500,000 that we'll receive this year.
Are you talking 17, 18, or 18, 19?
So we'll receive the money this year in 17, 18, but we're proposing to use that money that we received this year to fund this with that one-time funding source.
Okay, so this wouldn't be something over and above a budget?
That's correct, and it would not come out of your marginal revenue.
Okay.
So it is included, you have included it.
It is not in the budget yet. We are recommending that we use that Medicaid money
Use
that
this-
we'll receive in
okay.
September.
Okay.
So we're basically recommending that you put that in
And
the
it'll
budget?
be an amendment to the budget again. That's how we did it last year. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Questions?
Good.
Further questions? Okay. With that, do we have any, I'll ask one more time, do we have any more questions for Chief Dunn? Okay. Thank you, Chief.
So our next slide shows the cost of a 1% and 2% increase for general employees outside of public safety.
I don't know that there's a lot of questions, but I do know that citizens that are watching this, especially those that have seen me for the last 2.5 years up here, know that I'm a very big proponent of making sure that we take care of all the employees. Those people that are making sure that the water is safe for us to drink, those people that are in the ditch in December, repairing that water line or that sewer line. So I want to make sure that we take care of everybody. So this 2% to me is what I'd like to try to do.
I want to make sure that what we do is when we adjust the revenue stream, that we keep our overall expenses in line with the revenue stream. In other words, if we, I'll make this up, if we plan our revenue stream up 2%, we can't allow our expense line to go larger than 2% because you start eating away. So we need to make sure revenue is in line with expenses.
And when we allocate that $1 million that you have remaining, that will be a balanced budget with the same exact increase to revenue and the same exact increase to expenditure, or revenue will equal expenditure at that point.
Well, let me make sure, because we just said that we were going to change the budget to use we were proposing the 1.5% decrease versus a 3% decrease in revenue, as planned here, right?
Yes.
So that
And sales tax revenue only.
Right, but that net amount is what then?
The difference is $290,000, and
yeah.
it changes your $1 million excess to $1.29 million available to be allocated.
For the 18-19 budget?
Yes.
That doesn't make sense. Let me talk through that again. So right now, the 2018-19 budget proposed is $74,354,364. That's what is in front of us today on these slides.
Okay.
And what we said was we were going to change the sales tax line.
We would
incorporate-
You would increase the sales tax line here by the $290,000.
Correct.
That would also change this difference to the $1.29 million.
Right, so the question, so then when you get to the bottom line, instead of 185, well, the problem with that line is it's over the budget. It's your increase and decrease is relative to the budget, not the actual. So bottom line is you're going to take 74,354,364, right, and add 290,000 to it?
Correct.
So that makes your number, say that again. No, I mean, add 74,354,364 plus 290. That's what you're looking at.
644.
Down. The 1.5 is really we were at 3%. We took it to 1.5, so you're actually adding dollars to
Right.
the sales tax line. So that sales tax line now will go up by $290,000, which means you're increasing your total revenue by that amount.
That's the point. So you would now be at 74,300,000, you're going to be adding 74,354,364. Take that number plus 290,000.
Right.
And that total number is what? Okay.
That's right.
44,364. Okay, so using that number
That means
as
you're,
a comparison to 2017-8 projection, so your 18,416,400 minus 17,417,526 is what number? 17,417,526 minus 18,416,400 is 998,874. So if you add 72,503,327 plus 998, yes,
I'm sorry. What was that number, the 18,000, what is that?
18,416,400.
And then what were you,
And you take, if you subtract the difference between 18,416,400 from 17,417,526.
But those two numbers are not comparable?
I thought we
Because
said
you're
that
not
was
including-
290,000. Is that what we said?
For the
200
budget.
For the total revenues?
The 17,417 is not comparable to the 18,416 because you're not including your mixed beverage
Bingo.
tax or your bingo tax.
Well, I thought there was a sheet here, just correct me if I'm wrong. There's a sheet that specifically says sales tax revenue would be fiscal year 2018 projected ending sales tax projection
Yes,
is
ma'am.
18,416,400.
And I explained earlier that that number is strictly sales tax and does not include bingo tax or mixed beverage tax. That
But
is
the number
strictly
on this sales tax 2017-18 does include that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the point is we then talked about adding the sales tax, the liquor tax and the bingo tax, and we came up with 18,800, right?
Yes,
Okay,
thereabouts.
so you would take the 18,800 minus 17,47526, and you would get a number of, so 18,800 minus 17,417,526 equals a difference of 1,382,474. Is that correct? I might have hit the wrong keys. Is that right?
What did you subtract now? The 18.8?
The 18.8, which
Less.
is what we, minus this 17,417,526.
I came up at 1.416. It does not.
Yeah, we added the 290,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So if you take 18,800 minus 1,741,756, you get an increase of 1,382,474.
Thereabouts, yes. I use more exact numbers in my calculation, but it's about 1.4
I'm
million.
just rounding from these
Yeah.
numbers, so then if you use that, you would then take the 72,503,327 plus 1,382,474 to come up with a total number of 7,388,5,801. And if you take that number and add and subtract that number from the number of 7,464,364, you get a number called
Mayor, if I could simplify, regardless of where those numbers lead, if you increase the sales tax estimate and add $290,000 to it, you are left with $1.29 million to allocate as you see fit.
So what it looks like to me is the difference between the projected 2017 and 18 and our new total revenue, inclusive of the 290,000, would be a difference of 758,563.
It's a difference of 1,290,000.
Your revenue here, your increase in revenue here, $1.85 million would increase by $290,000.
I'm taking the actual projected 2017-18 versus the budgeted, the planned budget 2018-19 that's reflected here, plus 290. Okay, so then,
I was looking at the budget numbers.
yeah, that's the problem.
Okay.
So then you end up with a $758,563 increase in the 2018-19 budget compared to the projected actual 2017-18 budget. So we would be up $758,563, is that correct? I need to make sure.
But still, the bottom line is if we take that 290, which is 1.5% difference, that gives us $1,290,973 to allocate over these requests that we've had.
Well, not,
Yes, I mean, we've got $1 million here already, and if you take an additional $290,000
Sorry.
and add that, then you got $1,290,973.
sorry, I was just looking at the percent increase on revenue.
Okay.
Sorry, not as a net revenue
those-
versus expenditures, I'm
but-
simply
but
looking
those are
at
the-
it revenue. So in
But
that
that's the-
case, you have the 758,563, well, no, the 1 million, so you have 1,290,000.
Right. And those
If
are the
we-
dollars then we've got to figure out if we've got what requests we've got and we're willing to fund.
So it goes back to the question mark of keeping your expenditures as a percent increase in line with your total revenue stream. That's what we were getting to. So with that said, if you have, go back and describe this again, 758.
Look at the screen that she's got up right now, and if you were able to look at these particular items, then we would be over the projected budget by $191,645. If we took off the SAFER grant, for example, you would be within $41,000.
All right, so what I see here is based off of the 2018-19 revenue, as we just described, adding the 290,000, we're at 74,644,364 is our revenue, correct? Because the $1 million here is reflective if you use the budget of 27-18, not the actual.
That's correct.
And so that really isn't $1.2 million available.
That's
If you
not
take-
true. There is $1.2 million available if you increase that estimate, period.
So
You don't allocate increases or decreases. You allocate that revenue that's on the top half of the page.
Well,
Okay,
the
so-
revenue over expenditure.
Yeah. So right now, our expenditures are at 73,753,391. And what we have is revenue of 74,644,364. So the difference between those two is 74644,364 minus 73753,391 equals $890,973. Somebody should just verify my numbers, because I've been,
Which two numbers were you?
I
know you
used
had
the revenue stream of
74,644.
74,644,364, because that's $290,000 added to the 74,354,364.
Okay.
Because we've not changed anything on the expenditure lines at this point in time, so if you looked at it and said, what is the difference between the revenue and the expenditures? The 74,644,364 minus the 73,753,391 is a difference of 890,973, if I calculated it right. You want me to repeat those numbers again?
No, ma'am. This is the correct number to use when you're subtracting expenditures. This is what's currently in the proposed expenditure budget. So,
Oh, I'm confused then because the sheet I have has 73,753,391. That's what that is, right? That's right.
Why is it
And it's a 74,354 plus 364. So I have 353, that's what I have. So it's still 890,973.
Are we talking actuals or this projected budget for 18-19?
What I'm talking about is the 18-19 budget, total
Okay.
revenues versus total
Okay,
expenditures.
so if you take this number that they have up here and add $290,000.
Which is the
and then-
74,644,364.
Okay, and then leave this number, this total expense number as it is.
I did.
Okay, and that should give you $1,290,973.
Okay, let me do it again, because
Mayor, if I may,
yeah,
what does your number say, 73753?
yes.
Okay, I'm being told by my staff that that's an outdated document.
Okay, so that's the problem, because
Yes,
there's
ma'am.
$400,000 between, different on this sheet versus that.
Yes, that's the
That's
problem.
the 400. That's the problem.
Okay.
Because the sheet we were given to work from is 73,753,391. You're now saying it's 73,353,391.
Yes, this
Which
is
is
with
then
the-
the additional 400,000, which is different than the numbers
That's
we
the
have in
difference,
front of
yes.
us. So that's the 1,291,000.
Okay, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, see, that number was wrong. That's what I was using. So your number matches my number if we use the numbers we were, okay?
All right, so if we go back, Tina, if we
Yes,
can
sir.
go back to the sheet that shows those, yes.
So this
Oh,
was
the
how
other
we
one.
originally proposed it. Do you want to see it with the 290?
I want to see the other one. That one right there.
Okay.
Okay, to my point, you've got 1,290,000, 91 plus whatever those numbers are. If you decided to do the loyalty plan, the fire 2%, general employees 2%, and the health insurance increase, that will get you within $41,000.
I'm not proposing right now I think right now we need to have all options out and available for us for our September 4th meeting.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am?
I'm still, I guess, a little bit behind on what you're saying, what
It
is
is a little
being said,
confusing.
that we have the 1,291,000, and you're saying we have 100, you're saying we have 89.
Well, no, what
So-
I'm saying is, based off of the numbers here,
Uh-huh.
in this packet we were given, do
Right.
not match the numbers that were up there. They were
Right.
off by 400,000.
Okay,
So when I say the 890,000,
uh-huh,
you add 400 to it based off of the number they have here versus what we have. So that gives you the 1,290,000.
okay, so you're in agreement with that?
Yes.
That's the step I
That's the
guess that you
actual
get?
number now.
Yes,
Okay,
it's
all
just
right.
we were not apples to apples.
all right.
Okay, so then the question mark is, if you take a look at, my point is, and I'm going to get to that calculation in 1 minute, is that if you take a look at your percent increase in revenue projected, based off of these discussions, to last year, what's the revenue percentage increase planned? And what is the expenditure as presented here without any discussion about anything we've been presented today? What is that percent increase over last year or the 27-18 projected? so that we keep our revenues in line with our expenditures.
Mayor, if I could?
Yes.
If you start with a balanced budget with an equal amount for revenue and an equal amount for expenditure, and you budget conservatively so that you expect to beat the budget on the expense side, in other words, come in low, and you expect to make or beat the budget on the revenue side, which is come in high, then what you end up with, hopefully, is an experience where your revenues exceed the revenue budget, your expenditures are below your expenditure budget. And so when you go to budget the following year, if you start out with the assumption that revenues equal expenditure, then you are naturally going to have a smaller increase percentage-wise in revenues, actual versus new budget, than expenditures, because the expenditures came in lower than budget and the revenues came in higher than budget. That is kind of an occupational hazard for conservative budgeting. Daniel has been an advocate since day one for we need to beat our revenue budgets, and he and Tina have worked together to push the conservative element into those revenue budgets so that we consistently make or beat those amounts. And so your observation that an equal dollar increase is not an equal percentage increase is appropriate. That even though they go up the same dollar, the percentage increase for revenue is actually less than the percentage increase in expenditure. Even though you end up with a balanced budget, it appears percentage-wise you've gone up more on expenditures than revenues. But that same conservative objective exists in the new budget also. In the new budget, also there is the expectation that we're going to make or beat revenue budget, and that we're going to make or beat to the downside the expenditure budget. So it's a little skewed when you look at it only from a percentage basis.
Well, but it's also looking at it from a dollar basis too, because it's basically you take dollars to the bank, not percentages. And so what we have to make sure we do is really analyze the actual dollars as well, so that we're not overspending the dollars, because banks don't take your percentages.
Right.
They only take your dollars. And so we want to make sure that we have a relationship that maintains revenue exceeds expenses.
Absolutely. And I guess what I'm pointing out is percentages won't get you there. The actual dollar projections are what get you there.
So we just need to make sure revenue exceeds expenses.
Yes, ma'am.
Because the other thing that we know happens is if we go down, let's take the reverse. Let's say we are positive about our sales tax revenue right now, but it doesn't happen. But we've already agreed to increases in expenditures, primarily personnel. Problem is, what consistently happens is, rightfully so, you can't claw back increases in salaries. So those maintain themselves. And so you constantly decrease services and or maintenance issues. So we want to be conservative in all aspects of it so that at the end of the day, we keep a well-balanced financial statement in line with services.
And Mayor, we would agree with that, and that's where our directors and managers come in. As soon as we started seeing the decrease to sales tax revenues in 2016, I went to Daniel and I said, look, we need to watch this very closely. The second month we saw those numbers, we started meeting with directors right then and there.
Correct.
They started giving us ideas for cutting expenses in the budget. Unfortunately, we have a problem with staffing levels, and that we can't keep a lot of those staffing positions manned, and so we have salary savings there that we're able to use. And so we watch this very closely, and we're very serious about making sure that we meet the budget.
And Mayor, we agree with everything you just said. I mean, absolutely.
do.
Absolutely. You know, on our end, of course, we do budget very conservative. Even this right here with the 290, it's still a conservative estimate. So on our end, as Tina said a while ago, and I mentioned earlier, we'll be monitoring it very carefully. And if there is an adjustment of sales tax revenues, we'll do on our end to make sure that we adjust our expenditures down as well.
And I totally know you will. So this is not, the questions that I ask, the challenges that I have are not relative to me not believing
Yes,
that
ma'am.
you all do your job and
Yes,
do it
ma'am. I
well.
understand that. Thank you.
But on the other hand, this is a time period when we have to ask the questions about all of these issues. This is the only time we really get to ask the questions. Because what I found last year was when certain things were coming up to be approved, for example, in not the regular agenda, the consent agenda, people would say to me, well, I didn't know we approved $577,000 or $1 million worth of new trucks or buses or whatever, because we didn't ask those questions last year. And so we were very unaware of how much we approved in terms of certain things. All of a sudden, $1 million over here, and 500 over here, and then another 200 over here. Not that they were wrong expenditures.
Right.
You needed them, we needed to do it. My point is, we were unaware we approved that last year. So today is our chance to ask the questions so that when they come up in consent agenda, we're not surprised by those items because we didn't know we approved them. I don't want to be that ignorant this year,
Okay.
period. So that's why I asked the questions. I don't want to not know what I approved or suggested we approve with support of the council.
We respect that, Mayor. Thank you for that.
That's all.
Absolutely.
And the other part of it is, I think that we have been presented tremendous amount of options and ideas and things that we all want to spend some time thinking about. I feel like we've been presented too much to just all of a sudden today make a decision about what we want to approve or not, because we're not taking a vote today. Today was a budget workshop. It was a presentation, and I want us to go home and do some serious thinking about everything, talk some more, and we will come back on September the 4th and make some final decisions about what will be put into this plan.
Mayor, on September 4th, we will be bringing to you the draft budget.
Yes.
As it is presented, we will be hoping that you will adopt it in that state, because that is the first reading of the budget ordinance. So we
Intent
really
would
need some
be-
solid and good direction from you today in order to be able to bring that to you 1 week from today.
And we're going to have to be here several more hours, I think, because we've got a lot of questions left.
I'm
So-
here as long as you are.
Okay.
Can you go back to the slide we just had?
Yes.
With other people here and talking, and it is my opinion at this point, I've looked at all that. I look at good direction there with going, and I'll tee this off to everybody here on the board to talk to. I'm not liking the SAFER grant match. I would love to see those numbers without the SAFER in it. And if I'm not wrong, I mean, there's been a lot of math here discussed, but how close that gets us if we look at this without the SAFER.
Marilyn, if I can.
You would be
if I
short
can throw this scenario out.
$40,918.
I can throw this scenario out.
Say it again?
$40,918. And an option that you could consider would be to go with the 1.5% plus the 40,000 to close that gap, or some other combination, whatever you all discuss or decide to do.
Well, also the other thing we haven't discussed is healthcare. So,
Can I-
yes, Lane, please.
So I've been doing the little calculations, and this is before healthcare has been discussed. You take that 1.5% conservative number, bringing it to the 1.29, less your expenses from the loyalty pay, fire increase, salary increase, salary increase on the general, healthcare, bringing that to what we did last year as a shared amount, matching the 5.1%, and getting rid of the SAFER grant for now, and actually the 2% salary increase, which is a $3,000 savings. Is that right, Mason? $3,000 savings brings you to an excess of $5,296. So if you did want to go with the SAFER grant match, you would honestly have to find $144,738.
That's not the right number.
Well, Lane, which page are you looking at? Because I'm a
I'm
little
looking,
confused.
actually, kind of what I'm looking at here, with the middle expense of $166,089
Yeah.
for the COSA.
Okay. So on health insurance, we are saying that we want to split the increase, so 5.1 to employee and 5.1 to COSA, okay?
Year before, last year we did the split, and the year before that we did the zero increase to employees. If we stick with the matched employee to COSA, and you bring that number of 210,150 down to the 166, with the number of the fire salary increase actually being 223,667 estimated, you would come out to $5,296 excess, given that you do not go with the SAFER grant.
Okay, so what you're proposing, or what you're saying out loud right now is you're proposing the police salary increase of 2%, not the loyalty plan.
No, I would go with the loyalty plan.
But see, that has
presented.
0 on here. If
Well,
I'm looking
zero,
at the same
yeah,
page.
0 for the increased salary. Loyalty
Loyalty
plan
plan's the
at the
top number.
477.
Like a third page from the very back.
Yeah,
Mayor.
third from the very back.
Third from the very back.
So with what Lane's proposing, and we're using a calculator up here that we already had prepared, you would have a remainder of $7,580. If you, we reran the numbers that the fire department presented for their suppression, or compression issue.
Suppression.
Suppression.
Yeah,
So we
It's
included, we
appropriate.
included that exact dollar amount, and then
What is that exact?
222,230.
So that would be coming, that's 70.
7580 would
Lane's
be your
proposal
remaining.
balances the budget. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
What I want to
Excess of
understand,
$7,000.
I want to go back and go through it line by line, just
Yeah,
so I make
yeah,
sure.
definitely.
So you're proposing that we maintain that we support the loyalty pay plan of $477,817.
Mm-hmm.
You're proposing the fire request for
Compression.
222,330.
Mm-hmm.
You're proposing a salary increase of general of 418,104. You're proposing the 210,150 to be cut in half.
Match what we did last year.
166,089 would be the cost to split it between
That's a
employee and
difference
city.
of 45,000.
Yes.
And eliminating the SAFER grant.
And if we get, Chief, if we get the SAFER grant, we can budget amend that later, correct?
We certainly could try to find a funding source after we receive the grant, yes.
So that balances it to $7,000 excess.
So with that said, we are, that figure
I have
there
I
is
have a-
150, so you're 45,000. No, that's, so you basically, what did you say, $7,000?
7580 in the black, yeah.
Black.
All right, so are we asking then, I'm going to go back to my, numbers, and ask, are we increasing our percentage if we do all of this as proposed? Do we increase the percent that personnel represents to the total compared to, you have 70.66 is what personnel is currently budgeted without any of these other additions?
We've made a couple of slight changes, like with the fire, that's a little bit different, but our calculation for that with the pay plan and all of the other increases was 71.18%.
So we went up.
You added five police officers, the police pay plan, and raises for other employees. So you would
that's
expect that
salary.
number to go up
What I
slightly.
can't support is an increase percentage of 1.17 over existing.
Oh, that also included the SAFER grant, so if you pulled that out, that would be a little bit less. It would take us some time to compute that, though. It's an increase of less than 0.5%.
If you take out the SAFER grant, so then you're going to be at 71.83 minus 0.50.
71.18.
So 71.18 or 71.33?
18.
Because you're at 71.83 and you said take out 0.5%, so that'd be
No.
71.53?
No, we'd be 71.18 is what I had said.
71.18.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I put 83.
Okay, no, that's okay.
So 71.18 minus your 0.5 takes you down to 70.83 compared to this.
No.
No.
71.18 minus, here's how I would do it. The 71.18 minus the 70.66 that we had showed you earlier.
So it's 0.52 difference, so then you would be
And that is bef-
70.66.
So it's 0.5% different, and that's before pulling out the SAFER grant. And that would take a little time for us to compute that. So Mayor, if we went with Lane's proposal, this number here, you would be revenue over expenditure of $7,580.
Over
Revenue over expenditure.
revenue over expenditure, sorry.
Billy, do you have any comments?
I have
I'm
a
liking
question.
the direction that this is taking, since Tina and group have asked for a pretty clear direction. I like the police loyalty, the fire compression proposal that was given to us, 2% general salary increase. Sharing the cost of the health insurance, I like that. I don't know too many operations where the employee doesn't have a shared cost in their benefits. So I would like to see us consider that. And then to a point that Lane made, because I would like to see us apply for this SAFER grant. I think, it will continue to make our city safer and our fire department better equipped. But if that's something that we can not plan for right now, but in the future, if there's, if we get the SAFER grant and we can look at maybe some other opportunities we may have to be able to, fund that.
We have already applied for the SAFER grant. We just haven't gotten word back yet as far as I know that's why I saw the chief walking up here.
In December.
We just haven't gotten word back whether we received it or not, so.
So we won't put it in the budget.
It's not, well, again, on
We
our
already
end.
planned.
On our end, if, it's hard to plan for something that we don't know for sure that we're gonna receive anyway, so that kind of takes away, budgeted dollars. So at this point, it would be prudent to kind of hold off on that anyway, because we don't know anything as far as whether it's gonna come in or not. So at this point, I don't see an issue with doing that and reviewing that later, at a later point. Okay.
So that's where I am, Mayor, with that, and especially since it appears that we would come out in the black a little bit, not much, but a little bit. That's always better than not being able to claw our way out of the red bucket. So.
Thank you. Lucy, do you have comments?
As far as what we've been looking at and what I've heard everyone say, what we're looking at when all these numbers are said and done, the health insurance is only going to be paid half. The increase, 2% for the rest of the employees. Right? Oh, sorry, Anthony. He got mad at me earlier.
It's an electric shock back through the microphone. Go, Anthony.
But, yeah, from what they're saying, what I'm listening to is, I think we've come to a complete circle that we actually are saying that we can afford these things and look at them as something positive to move on with. Like I said, the fire and the police and the city employees, I mean, we're doing the best we can, and I'm just glad that we're not going to be in the red. And at least from what y'all have been doing, all the numbers, it doesn't look like it. But
It's confusing.
it is, but it's coming, I mean, the way the numbers show.
Tom?
One thing I wanted to look at, last year, and Billy, I'm going to go with you, healthcare is a shared cost. No matter what we do today, the city employees will always have a shared in it. I was hoping, last year, correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, we skipped on this one for 26,000. We could have picked up the increase. I was hoping there'd be a way, and I get it, and I get where we're going with what it is. I would love to figure out a way, we're talking nearly 1,000 employees and less than, 60,000 or whatever it is, the 166. I was hoping a way to pick that up and go. But if that's not recoverable, I understand that and willing to move on. But I'm glad to see that we took care of everybody from one end to the other with what we've done today. It's been a long process, but I'm not in fond of the safer because I just don't know what that cost is going to be in 3 years. Okay, I think that's a big one we're rolling the dice on, not knowing what we'll see in 2020, 21, 22.
Question, I guess this may be for Lisa. If we did the shared cost with the employees, how many of the employees would get no raise whatsoever because the 2% in salary increase would not take care of their cost in their increased shared cost of insurance?
Councilman, I don't think there would be anybody that wouldn't see an increase in salary, because if you look at the cost of insurance, that's a smaller number than their salary is. So if they get a 2% raise in salary, but their insurance goes up 5%, it's not a loss of 3%.
So you're not going to have any anywhere up, and that's obviously going to be lower down. I'm making that assumption. So you're not going to have anybody that's. I know that's probably a silly question, but
Tommy, I think her answer is based on employee only.
Yes, that is correct.
If you have big coverage on your family,
right,
then you might see a different impact. But
correct.
Right.
I'm talking just the low option employee only coverage. But I did have one other point to bring up on the insurance. We are still cranking numbers. We had a meeting yesterday with our consultant, Holmes Murphy, and because we made some changes to our insurance on the prescription plan effective August 1st, we hope to see a savings of $255,000 in the health insurance program, and if that's the case, it'll greatly reduce this number that's presented to you today. But we won't have that until sometime later today.
I mean, that's a
and the key there is that the key.
One person at a time, please.
Go ahead, Michael.
The key there is that the insurance number is an estimate. It's just the latest estimate. That number changes each month as we have claims experience. And so if the council votes to dedicate a certain amount, then the premiums would alter based on the council has committed this much. And if the experience gets better, then the employee piece may not have to go up as much. Or if the experience gets worse, the employee piece may have to go up more. It's simply a placeholder for when we finally make the decision on premiums.
So we're basically asking that whatever the increase is, it be split between employee and City of San Angelo, since you don't have a firm number.
Typically, in this situation, we would ask the council to allocate either the 210 or the 166, and then when we get those numbers back, we use that 166 or 210 towards the city side, and the remainder would fall on the employee side.
So we're saying the 166. One of the things that I think is really important that we talk about when we talk about budgeting is that we have 100,000 population city, of which many of them are self-employed. As we talk about increases, whether it be to salaries and or to insurance, not everyone who contributes money to this city gets the same luxury of percent increases. So we're saying, okay, we are going to allocate 2% raises to city employees. Not every citizen in the city of San Angelo will get a 2% raise this year. So we want to make sure that what we don't do is be so insular that we don't realize the big picture of what's going on out there. So, Tommy, did you have further, because you sort of start on that and then.
No, I think my question was answered. My question was I didn't want to leave any employee where if the increased cost, the 5% shared to them would wipe out a raise entirely and essentially make them go backward. That was my question. I think she answered that. So it sounded like, did I hear correctly that we made a change to the prescription drug plan that could equate to a potentially $250,000 savings to us, so that could then be applicable to this, where they may not have to have the 5% cost share? Okay, that's good. That's good news.
All right, so the last thing I'm going to bring up for discussion is we have on here, just as the police department and the fire had a very focused approach to who would get raises, loyalty pay versus compression. We talk about salary increase, general 2%. We have talked before in the past that we're really want to make sure that when we review people, that this 2% is not 2% to everybody, but it's 2% for how. So if we do merit increases and you get a meet standard is one thing, if you get an exceeds is another thing. This simply says 2% to everybody because you're employed. And we don't want the blue ribbon mentality, I don't think.
No, ma'am, we do have, what you're doing is approving an amount that is a 2% above, but on our end, the one thing that we've been looking is, as we do our reviews, we have those individuals that exceed, that meet, or fall below. So we are talking about splitting that, and there's the opportunity to go into 2.5 for those that exceed, and a 1.25 for those that meet, and of course, those that do not, are below, don't get anything. You know, so that is exactly the way that we're looking at it right now.
And I think that's important because I think we have a lot of employees who exceed, who put 150% into their jobs, and I'd like to make sure that those people receive rewards that indicate we know what you're committing to your job and how much you add to us. And so that's important to me. We don't always have in city government an opportunity to increase, to move up in rank. So many organizations, you have an opportunity to move up to the next level job. We don't have that necessary. So the only thing we have is to make sure our people who exceed have an opportunity financially to understand we appreciate the work that they've done. With that said, what other direction do you need?
Mayor, I have one other
Yes.
point that I'd like to make. Earlier, I talked about the $1.4 million that we're projecting that we'll have over as far as our sales tax revenues from projected. The actuals will be about $1.4 million more. We have one item to discuss, and I'd like to bring back to the City Council at a future City Council meeting, probably next week, is to discuss the use of those monies for specific projects. But the one that I wanted to address today, because we are under a time crunch, is those vehicles, double end-up vehicles for the police department. We have a lot of them that are breaking down at this point. We had forecasted that to include an additional 12. The reason, and again, let me kind of back up a little bit. The cost for the vehicles that we replace, which is the Explorers, is going up a little over 17% by mid-September. So we'd like to get an order in on time to have those cost savings to the city. So we're asking that that you take a look at this and hopefully have we can get some approval as to the ability to go ahead and purchase those additional 12 vehicles and save that money and get some of those bad vehicles offline, a lot of those charges that break down.
That would make O&M
I think that there's strong support for that. The question mark is whether we're allowed to take a vote on that today or
not.
whether we are only talking about it for consideration and then we will vote on it on September 4th. The question mark is if we vote on it on September 4th, we don't have to have a second reading or anything on it, right? So that's what we need to talk about so we don't delay it again on September the 4th. So we need to know the real action that needs to be taken today to move to 4th of September for final action.
No.
I know, I said September 4th for final action.
So for the budget, I think we have direction, given what you all have just told us to do with the budget, okay? So I think we'll be okay on that aspect. Now, are you talking about the 1.4 million?
That's correct.
Having
Just,
direction on
just
that?
in general, the only one that I'm
So-
addressing right now is because of the time constraint that we have and the
Right.
cost going up in mid-September for those vehicles. So.
Right. So our opportunity would be either to discuss it at the September 4th meeting and then have on that same agenda the budget amendment? So that
We
it can
need
be
to
approved?
do that in order to be timely with this purchase,
good.
I think.
And Daniel, is that,
That'll
Okay.
be perfect.
okay?
Okay.
All right.
Very good.
We can
All
do
right,
that.
with that said,
I-
yes,
I do need
ma'am.
to clarify one thing, and typically in the past, the police chiefs have gotten a pay raise in lieu of the pay plan. So I just need clear direction, do they get the pay raise on top of the pay plan?
We're just approving the loyalty pay plan.
Okay, thank you.
So, Brent, I still have a question. Yes, ma'am. So are we moving forward? I know Lisa brought up that they're making a prescription plan that they might have a number on this afternoon, that maybe 1/5 of that change might cover to go all the way to that. So are we moving forward with still the half, or if that revenue potential comes in,
We're
to
gonna
cover
move-
that?
We're going to move forward with the the 166 or the
Right,
50.
the half split.
Typically,
Because
Tom-
this is just a recommendation to work with. If she comes back on September 4th and tells us, we now know the real number, we'll then vote on it. Today is just so they can prepare the
direction.
budget. It is not a final budget as of today. It's just a
I'm with you. I just want to know if they're
recommendation.
going to look at it both
And
ways.
so September 4th, we'll have new numbers and we can open that discussion.
Want to make sure we didn't run by that one.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. With that, do I have a motion for adjournment? Oh, we don't
No.
even have to do that today.
No,
We're
we're
so
good.
lucky.
We done.
We're done. Thank you, everybody, for the time and effort put into this budget and the conversations. Nothing is final as of today. They're just recommendations for the September 4th meeting. No final decisions.